This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, Sampley, Isotope, and API. You're hearing my voice right now on the API 3122V mic pre and Spectra 1964 C610 comp limiter through Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. So get ready to rock.
I love bass lines that are that aren't afraid to go up high and mix in with the guitar. That's a great thing about a lot of 80s music, because sometimes with some of these bands, like early REM, there's a lot of that where there's some notes where you have to really listen closely, like it's a clean guitar and a bass line, like really crisp bass, and you're like, which one's the guitar, which one's the bass? They're all kind of creating a harmony together.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. In my studio, I chose the OWC Mini-Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and expansion hub because it seamlessly connects to my Mac Mini M1 for my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini-Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Ever wonder how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? It's because I've been cheating by using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Try out the subscription option for yourself with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lij Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals and sometimes close friends so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Joe Armin, a drummer, guitarist, and songwriter, and home studio recordist and leader of the first band that I ever got to play with in St. Louis when we were in college. And that band was had an awesome name, which I've actually shared on the show before, called Ayatollah, Joe and the Hostages. And we may get into that detail later. Joe sent over an awesome introduction to who he is. So I'm actually going to read what he sent me because it's kind of a great way to introduce you, Joe, if you don't mind. All right, here we go. Joe grew up in Cincinnati and started playing piano, drums, and then guitar as a kid. He started multitracking in his basement in 4th or 5th grade. That's awesome. I didn't actually know that, dude. Joe got addicted to playing in bands and recording one-off tunes. In college, during the mid to late 80s at Washington University, which is where we both went in St. Louis, he played music in a handful of bands. One of his first that started doing paying gigs was a covers, an original 4-piece called Dr. Seuss, which was a band that Joe had with me. So, and as Joe put it, with yours truly, Lij Shaw. So that's me, rock stars. I go by Lij now, but Joe knows me by my full name. Joe and Elijah got their first studio experience while taking a recording studio course together at college. Joe's focus quickly became writing original songs. By senior year, he was in a band, Dirt Cousin, with another mutual friend of ours, David Gendelman, co-writing songs and starting to play dive bars and music clubs throughout the St. Louis area. After graduating and then moving back and forth between San Francisco and St. Louis, Joe finally settled in San Francisco for good in 1994, where he currently works as an architect while still playing gigs and recording at home. He started recording with a handful of friends under the name The Aerosols, self-releasing a self-titled CD in 1999. The music was oftentimes noisy and spacey, but as Joe says, the pop was lurking in the darkness. It took several years for a band with a steady lineup to form. A trio version of the Aerosols played live in the San Francisco area and beyond from the mid-2000s until Joe's future wife, Amy Fowler, joined in 2010, at first on keyboards, but eventually on second guitar and backing vocals also. This four-person lineup released an LP in 2014 called Fake Mirror, containing angular psych songs that were less shy about embracing melody. That's cool. Amy also started her own 5-piece band, Latitude, which I'm going to reveal right now. I finally got it when I was flipping through the records, Joe, that it's Attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It just totally passed by me at first. So that was in 2014 with herself on guitar and vocals and with Joe on drums and backing vocals. Latitude has had a couple of full-length releases, the latest, Mystic Hotline, coming out in 2020 on Emotional Response Records. Meanwhile, during all this time, the Aerosols have continued to play live and record. They released their third full-length, the slightly more atmospheric LP Room for Wrong in late 2021, a very cool record. We got links to that in the show notes. We got links to all this stuff in the show notes, Rockstars, so please make sure to scroll down and click through. Over the past 14 years, Joe's recorded and mixed all of the Aerosols recordings at his and Amy's home studio, Boring Basement Studios, located in San Francisco. He has also recently provided guest guitar tracks on recordings by James Good. Cool stuff, too. And David Gendelman. Dave, shout out to you, man. Please welcome, big fanfare Rockstars, Joe Armin to Recording Studio Rockstars. Joe, are you ready to rock, dude?
I am. Yeah, thanks.
I'm so glad to have you here, man. So, Rockstars, I don't know if that was enough of a reveal, but Joe is kind of my first guitar hero, to be totally honest, Joe. I mean,
oh Lord.
Yeah, I mean, it's the truth, dude. Back in college when we started playing, you had formed you'd formed a band and you invited me to come play bass with you, and it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah. That was a fun band. That was a chaotic kind of did a lot of covers and very fast, and had Mike on drums. You remember Mike?
I do. Yeah. That's right, man. He was our punk rock drummer.
He was from DC, I think, and he was very serious, and he wore drum gloves. But he was a cool guy. And then there was like you and me, and then Dave and Mark. Great front man. Yeah. So that was the first band that I ever played in that did an original live. And so that was and you were there for
our,
I think we did 2 gigs. We did, so me and Dave were recording in our dorm room, and we did this song called the Hardcore Nerd Song, which was a hardcore version of a song I had done called the Nerd Song. And then so that band did it live at one of our shows. And I think the mic, I have the recording, and I think the PA cut out so you don't hear any of the singing. So
wow.
But that was the humble beginnings of playing original music live. For both of us. Yeah.
So many things to say about that for me. I mean, for example, that was the very first time I learned that so I was invited to play bass, and that's when I had to go through the learning lesson of, you don't play bass like a guitar. Bass is different than a guitar,
Right.
Which was good. I think I'm actually still learning that, to be honest.
Yeah, you play bass sometimes still?
Yeah. No, I play bass a lot of my stuff. Yeah, and then every once in a blue moon, I get to play with somebody else on bass.
Right.
But as I've learned, as people talk about and point out, that bass is one of the instruments where, if you're playing guitar, when the chord change happens, there's kind of a wide latitude to kind of fake your way into the next chord. You don't always have to spell it out immediately, but on the bass, you have to know what the next root note is, or else it just doesn't work,
Right. You're kind of holding it together. Yeah, and it's an interesting space with fitting between the melody that's going on and the rhythm too. I really like playing bass, actually. I've kind of gotten into that.
That's something that my mentor Brad Jones pointed out. He was a bass player and taught me a lot in the first studio I was at, but he always talked about that too. He'd say bass is this instrument that really supports the vocal melody, and sometimes you kind of move up with the vocal melody and fill in that space between the guitar and the drums, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So remembering Mike on drums, one of the things I remember is when we were rehearsing, he was always very impatient. he sort of had this
Yes.
attitude. A shout out to you, Mike, if you're listening. But he had this attitude that, like, he kind of knew what the song was supposed to be. And meanwhile, I don't know who else were like, farting around on our instruments trying to figure out what we were going to play. And he was already, like, his drumsticks were already set down. He was just sitting there reading a book.
Oh yeah. He had a paperback that he would bring to practice, and he would be buried in the paperback. And then he's like, okay, you guys ready now? Okay. All right. Like when we finally got around to being ready, like me probably showing Dave Dobbs the chords, and yeah. Oh my God. I forgot about that detail.
That's great. And I had forgotten that Dave was playing rhythm guitar with us too. So
yeah.
Maybe you should explain how we all knew each other at that point.
Yeah, I actually knew Dave from Cincinnati. Like he actually, we both grew up in Cincinnati and roomed together at Washington University freshman year. And then Mark Pemberton was also on our floor, our dorm floor. And so the three of us played together before. Elijah, you came the next year. You were a freshman.
That's right. You were already a sophomore. You were already living in like the fancy dorm room at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So that band started, I don't even know what. Yeah, there was the Sigma Nu, the fraternity connection. Right. Exactly. I wasn't going to admit that I was in a fraternity for one semester.
Oh, really? Was that true too for you? Yeah. I forgot about that. Gosh.
I left after one semester. Yeah. It was kind of, it wasn't for me. And I should have known.
I mean, the story on the street is that I was blackballed. So
yeah,
you should feel good about your departure.
It's actually true. Yeah. Elijah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, rock and roll. I was starting my rock and roll path early.
Yeah. You headed to the dark alley early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably a blessing for you. But so we just did, the only two shows I think we did were at the fraternity with we did one show with future Jackass creator Jeff Tremaine. Do you remember his band?
I forgot that we played a show with his band, but I remember Jeff well. And I particularly remember that Jeff was one of the first entrepreneurs I ever knew, because he designed and printed his own t-shirts and then would sell them at the big student center. And I had a shirt that was like, it was like a Andy Warhol version of Alice from the Brady Bunch.
Oh yeah, I'm remembering this now.
Yeah, like four different panels, and then it just said "Alice Don't Surf," and I wore that T-shirt into the ground. I think,
wow,
like I didn't even want to throw it out when it became a rag. I still, cleaning the kitchen.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. But once that T-shirt sounds completely familiar to me now, because I must have seen you wear it all the time. Yeah, exactly. So we did a couple shows there, and then you and I kind of dumped the other guys. Well, Mike left Washington University, and Dave and Mark. I mean, we should have actually kept Mark. He was a really good front guy.
He was awesome. He was like a wild man front man.
Yeah, totally. A great voice too. But we kind of, the two of us went on our own and got a new rhythm section, Dave Melson and Adam Jackaway. And we started Dr. Seuss the next year, which was definitely a more together band, because Ayatollah Joe was just kind of a good time party band, kind of rock and roll sped up stuff. But we started doing with our band junior year. We got we kind of dialed things in a little better. Dave was like a really good bass player. Adam was a good, he was really a great drummer, capable drummer. Yeah. So, and we kind of did a lot of covers, like you were saying, like kind of a wide range of stuff, like kind of all over the place, like REM, Warren Zevon.
That was my introduction to REM was through you guys.
Oh, through that band.
I mean, my introduction to so much music was through you guys, through you, through Dave, through, people at the fraternity, the time. That was just that time when REM was exploding. Right. Yeah, there was that was a lot of music I didn't really know growing up in Cincinnati, but coming to Washington You were kind
University,
of a classic rocker coming out of Cincinnati.
I was, you remember that? Yeah, I was. I mean, and my yeah, my guitar, like I grew, like, went from drums to guitar the older I got, and my guitar style. I listened to some of the tapes like from back then, or, my memory of them is that I sounded like, it was just like that kind of overdriven 70s guitar kind of stuff,
Yeah.
those kind of like riffs. Like I was trying to think like, do you know that version of Sweet Jane, the live version of Sweet Jane that Lou Reed does like in the 70s
Yeah, I
with a
think
huge
so.
guitar intro? It's got this huge bombastic guitar intro, and it got played on 70s like rock radio a lot. And it's like I played like that kind of stuff. Like I think the guitarists were Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner. Like I hate that style now, but that's yeah. So
That's
Washington
great.
University, we were introduced more to like, Velvet Underground and the Smiths and
Yeah.
REM
And Pink
and like
Floyd, early Floyd too, which you might have
early
known about.
Floyd.
But like I
Yeah,
was hearing some
yeah.
of that showing up in your music today, like early Saucer full of Secrets and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's yeah. Piper at the Gates of Dawn, Sid Barrett stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always been, that became a big influence around that time too. Yeah, for me. And so yeah, I think that school was a good place to kind of get among our friend group, like get to hear some good stuff. Dave Gendelman, my roommate and mutual friend of ours. I'm still in touch with him.
Does he
all
have
these
his
years.
late night TV show yet? Because we always predicted that he was going to be the host of late night
I forgot about
television.
that. Like interviewing people.
Yeah, we just figured he was
Yeah.
going to take over where Dave Letterman left off.
Yeah, I mean, he did get into that in writing. I mean, because he got into writing like sports, kind of interesting sports stories
Right
for
on.
like New York Times Online, and yeah. So he did do that to an extent in a like literate, I guess, medium. But like Dave turned me and you onto so much stuff. I mean, he kind of came to college already knowing all this stuff,
Yeah.
like Jonathan Richman, Alex Chilton, Iggy, and the Stooges, and the list goes on. And like stuff, I did a radio show with him and like taped some of the shows and like listened to them later. And it's like, what was this song Dave played? What's that record? Like just, so anyway, that was kind of a big education for me. So
He's probably the reason why we went to go see Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers
yeah,
play at
totally.
Mississippi Nights was the big club. And now it's
Right.
huge in St. Louis. But of course, back then it was like a little half size, kind of like Nashville's got this place called the Exit Inn that was always, in the 70s was always a little narrow place
Right.
that expanded.
Mississippi Nights actually got demolished, I heard recently, because Joe Edwards, who owns Blueberry Hill, opened a competing place in University City.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he just stole the business, I think, from them, or
Wow.
stole or took it, whatever. Yeah, so I heard that they demolished it like a long time ago. But yeah, that's where like while we were in school, Camper Van Beethoven, the Meat Puppets,
Yep,
like all
yep.
those bands would come there, and yeah, it was a smaller place.
We
Husker Du.
saw-
I wasn't at the Husker Du show, but
Do you remember going to see the Flaming Lips when it was nothing
Yes.
but like bubble machines and
yeah.
strobe lights and like I can't remember if the drummer
They
was
were great.
wearing like a dinosaur mask during the drum solo or if I just remember that from the Blue Oyster Cult video.
Oh yeah, I can't remember what the drummer was wearing, but I remember they opened for the Meat Puppets and kind of their stage show kind of blew the Meat Puppets away. I remember it
Yeah.
was nuts. They were a power trio back then. They kind of sounded like Grand Funk back then. It's before they had any pop hits. So they were this
That's
weird,
right.
heavy kind of psych band that like the bass player played through tons of pedals and stuff. Yeah. I mean, that was a great like. Yeah, I mean, I might be still just stuck in the classic rock zone if it wasn't for all the people who are, around us kind of feeding good music into our heads, like in St. Louis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, yeah. And then the following year, and then I started playing in the band with Dave. Like I was writing some of the songs we did together in Dr. Seuss were songs that Dave and I wrote, like just hanging around in the dorm room. And that was kind of, and you were around for a lot of that. That was a quintessential kind of time where
Yeah.
Dave figured out that he could multi-track on his dual cassette tape deck. And so we started multitracking, just hanging out, doing these real offhand songs.
Yeah. No, so you're going to have to break that down a little bit because that's
Yeah.
such a golden classic story for early recording. So What exactly were you guys doing in your dorm room? And I will preface this by saying, I was the freshman on the first floor and you guys were downstairs in like the cool dorm rooms when you get a little older and you can select the one down on the ground floor. And I was just walking through the hall and I hear a guitar coming out of an open doorway. And luckily I was still in that, youthful, naivete vigor where I was like, hey man, you play guitar? I play guitar too.
I was trying to remember. Did you just come up to the dorm room and just introduce yourself kind of thing?
I just walked in and you were playing guitar. You were pretty nice about it. But Dave had the funniest story of all. He said he was sitting on his self-described, he was sitting on his bed in his dorm room and he was like reading some like, what's some super trendy book, like Chandler or whatever,
Yeah.
and
Raymond
he
Chandler,
was, Raymond Chandler. And he like, just kind of like his eyes just roll up and he looks over his book at me and he's like, oh God, who is this freshman?
That's hilarious. Yeah. You were fearless back then. I mean, that's kind of like you had that to you. Like Dave was a little more like judgmental and I was somewhere in between, like somewhere.
Superpowers, Wonder Twin powers unite. We created a super team.
Exactly. So if it just been Dave, like you might have scampered off and been like, oh man, shouldn't have knocked on that door. But then, so we were, I knew Dave for freshman year. We decided to live together. And we had one of these dorm rooms that was the ground floor of the dorms. I think all these 1960s, 50s dorm buildings are demolished now, I think. But the ground floor had like student lounges and then only two or three rooms. And these rooms had their own bathrooms. So this is kind of like luxury living. If you wanted to stay on campus sophomore year, you could request these special rooms, and the freshmen are all upstairs. So Elijah, you lived above us. Lij, you lived above us. And so Dave figured out that he had a dual tape player, and he somehow figured out it had a 1/4-inch input. And I think just messing around, I was gone. I remember I came back and he was like, Joe, I just figured out that we can multi-track, we can layer stuff from tape to tape. Like if let's say I play guitar in tape, play guitar or record it onto tape 1, right? Put tape 1 into the play. What do you call it? A carousel, I guess. Play that one, record onto the other tape. And while that tape's playing with the mic input, I add a second track, like singing over the guitar. And, so basically he figured that out. And so I just told him about this recently, and he was like, "Oh yeah, everybody was doing that stuff." I was like, "I don't know if everybody was doing that. Like a lot of dual tape players didn't have a mic input."
Yeah.
So and I'm sure some other folks figured out to do this, but it was great. So we just started multi-tracking, layering stuff. The problem was that your first track would get more and more buried under hiss, and it would get bassier sounding. So sometimes with the recording, I think there were a couple songs where the early track got so buried that you then have to add it again at the end just to clarify it.
The original double.
So yeah, exactly. The original like guitar double track. So we were writing songs that way. And then there were songs that like in our band, with Elijah, Dr. Seuss, we started playing live. And of course they sounded different. And then my senior year, we just kind of like Dr. Seuss kind of like stopped playing. Adam left, and I started a band with Dave.
Actually, I think that was junior year. I think it was.
Yeah.
I think sophomore. I'm sorry, your senior year. Yeah. Right. Yep.
Yeah. My senior year.
Rockstars, thanks for hanging with us on this.
I know. Did we lose anybody yet? Anyway, so we started that's the band Dirt Cousin that me and Dave played, and we were writing songs together and starting to play in clubs. And this is so this is like 1989, 88, 89. And, it was like getting to know Chris King, who was a little more in touch with like the St. Louis music scene outside of campus. Starting to play places like Cicero's, which was just a kind of a tiny basement bar next to campus where like, Uncle Tupelo was playing like very early on. And like Brian Henneman had his band Chicken Truck playing. And so we're starting to do gigs like that and play other places like the Great Grizzly Bear. And so that was fun. That was like, we were underage. I was underage at least, but nobody really cared at that point.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That was my introduction to playing live, outside of campus.
Yeah, right. Because when we did the cover band together, which I don't know why we spelled it Seus, S-E-U-S with one S, but for some reason we misspelled it, and then that became like, we thought that was cool to misspell it after that.
Right.
But or where we came up with the name, but our gigs were all just in the the campus bar party room, the gargoyle.
Right. Which had good bands play, like the Feelies played there, and yeah. But
it was super fun too. I mean, we really felt like rock stars up there with the whole party going on and all the other kids dancing. And I don't know if you remember this too, but during that time we needed a PA, and somehow we had to source our own PA or something like that. So we found this guy in town who was like an old school rocker, and he and his wife, were in music, and he was just the coolest dude. And he'd bring his big PA, and he'd record a cassette of the tape, of the board tape for us and send us home. And then, I'm still listening to it today, I'm sure, Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He made it sound really big. He put like delay on the vocals and sometimes on the guitars. And like those are honestly, I think some of those gigs are some of the best paid gigs I've ever done. My original stuff, Jesus, no. I mean, we're playing like for the college dance on Saturday night and doing like a variety of stuff that like there was enough for everybody to kind of like get into. And he made us sound really big and bombastic.
When your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs, mixes, and notes in one place. But figuring out how to share all the files can be frustrating. There's always somebody in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to collaborate and communicate by creating a shared project so the whole band can get organized before the session. Just upload a voice memo, lyric sheet, song charts, photo, video, mixes, masters, or even invoices, and start commenting. Sign up for your free account now with 25 gigs of storage and unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade at samply.app. The Spectra 1964 C610 complementer brings fast, clean, quiet compression and limiting to your recordings and mixes. The C610 includes the famous Spectra 101 amplifier used in legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, and Record Plant. I love my C610s for drums, vocals, guitars, and especially bass, which helps me get the perfect low end in my mixes. And you can make your mixes rock at Spectra1964.com. And also, so I did get a 4-track somewhere in the midst of all that and started learning how to do that. But I think it was after I had seen what you guys were doing. What you guys were doing was the first time I was... Well, no, that's not entirely true. But somehow when I saw you guys, I thought like, I couldn't believe that you were sitting there recording songs, making up songs and recording them in your dorm room. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world,
Oh yeah. On the fly. Yeah. And they weren't songs where we're like, hey, let's practice this for a week and then record it tomorrow. It was very offhand, right? Every song got written and recorded right then.
Yeah. It's the only time I've ever heard gunny sack used as a lyric in a track.
Was that one of Dave's?
That was one of Dave's. And every time I bring it up, nobody knows what a gunny sack is, but I'm positive it's an important item.
Oh yeah. He was good with the lyrics and still is. Yeah. So yeah. So man, that was. Yeah, I still love like I just filled a bunch of tapes with that stuff, and we also we took that studio course with Punita Singh. What's that her name?
So here's my recollection of that too.
Yeah.
I think I could be wrong about this, but I think maybe didn't you take a recording class with Chris the year before I got there, or was that Chris was the Big Toe sessions or something like that? But I do remember taking a recording class and then a synthesizer class.
Oh,
which I don't know
okay.
if you took that one with me, but
I
that
did
was a
not
lot
take
of
that.
that was so much fun.
Right.
But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Just
Yeah.
describe the recording class, and then I'll tell you what the definition of gunny sack is on Wikipedia.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you and I weren't in the same studio class, but anyway, so yeah, I can't remember what year it was, but we took it with this great teacher who was just so chill. And it was, God, what was the machine? I can't.
I can
The
tell you.
technical
I can
stuff.
tell you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So
Good.
it was
Yeah.
an
What was it?
Otari MX50.
Okay. How many
And
tracks?
it was 8-track, and it was a
Okay.
tabletop unit.
Right. What
reel
size
to
tape?
reel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was
quarter inch?
Yeah, it was I think it was 1/4 inch.
Okay. I still have a tape with a song you, me, and Dave did, Skip to Malou Babe.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you remember that, but like I've not been able to mix it down because I can't find a machine that size. But,
wow.
But yeah. So we took a course. The technical stuff, that's never been my forte. Like, there was just, once there's too many knobs, like my memory banks start kind of failing me. So I did record some stuff there, but it didn't sink into it was great having great mics and all that. But like, I think after you took the course, you just kind of glommed onto that stuff a lot easier than me.
Maybe. I love this shit. So it's a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Right.
But no, I definitely gravitated towards the technical side of it. I talk about doing things like taking my 4-track over to the fraternity to Sigma Nu, and I remember recording, maybe it was Tom's band or somebody over there.
Oh, Lost Idaho or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. And then the thing that distinguished me as a recording engineer at that stage was that I could figure out how to connect the Radio Shack adapters to get this cable into that funny looking input on the thing and get it to work.
That is a good first step. Yeah. I didn't know you did that. Wow. Okay. You recorded those guys there.
Yeah. Maybe just once or something like that. But there's another important element of the dorm that you forgot to bring up. So one of the things that was key for us rock stars was the big echoey stairwells. Do you remember we used to take guitars in there and just jam and write songs and record onto cassettes?
Yeah. I have a tape. The weird thing is I've kept all this stuff. So I have, I think you and me played, in the stairwell, and we'd get that reverb. Yeah.
No, it's not weird, dude. You're a national treasure, and your ability to archive things has always,
it's ridiculous.
It's always been really, really important. So Rockstars, when Joe and I were roommates, I would, my room was a disaster. It looked like some sort of bomb went off, and I was coming and going, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. But then I'd go over to Joe's room, and Joe was like, everything was fastidious. It's like you knew where things belonged. I think you may have even taught me the value of putting a t-shirt on a hanger.
Yeah. Right.
But with that comes this archivist that knows how to keep tape safe for a long time.
Yeah. I've actually, a lot of that stuff has lasted. I don't think, fortunately, none of my cassettes, like where all this stuff, is archived, none of them have failed me yet. I'm kind of, I need to digitally back them up, but that just takes so much time, but I'm slowly doing it here and there. So,
you just need to know somebody in a recording city like Nashville.
I know. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
All right. So here's a question for you. Rockstars, Joe and I were both in the architecture school. That's another reason why we all knew each other.
Right.
I've talked about that some on this show, and whatever. Architecture was always described as frozen music. And I like to say that I decided I was going to go do liquid architecture instead, which is how I ended up here. But you stayed on with it, and other people. I can't remember. There was another Dave. I don't remember if it was Dave Dobbs.
Dave Dowell.
Dave Dowell. Yeah, I remember he really stood out to me as somebody who loved architecture. And, and it was only in hindsight that I'd look back and I realized that when I wanted to go record a song on a 4-track, he wanted to get out his beautiful pens and
Oh
and
yeah.
create a beautiful sketchbook and stuff. So I guess my question to you, Joe, is,
Yeah.
Do you think that your approach to kind of carefully keeping the music and stuff like that, has that been part of your personality that opened up the world of architecture for you? And like, what are some things that you've learned in architecture that you feel you carry over to music now that really
Okay.
helps you out?
Right. Yeah. You mean just being an anal person?
I don't know. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
No, I mean, definitely being, yeah, I mean, I'm careful and a little, yeah, I can get a little OCD on stuff. And, sometimes like, yeah, sometimes spend too much time on something like
Well, we
more
all
than,
do that in the studio for sure.
yeah, studio. I mean, you kind of have to do that a bit. But yeah, what I've learned from each, I guess I probably learned. I did start bringing some, like, while being in architecture school. I remember at some point senior year. I mean, because all this stuff we were doing, early on in the dorms, like when we were writing, like on the tape deck and all that. That
Yeah.
stuff was so ad hoc and just really quick and not much editing.
It was like a sketchbook for sound.
Yeah, literally, it's like a sketchbook. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the beauty of it. But then I remember like playing in the band with Dave later on in Dirt Cousin, senior year, starting to write songs and thinking like, oh, I could kind of, how about move this part around? What if this song, what if the verse is actually the bridge instead? This part I thought was going to be good for a verse. It doesn't have to be the verse. You can move it here instead and maybe only do it once. That kind of thinking, like just moving parts around, like, which is, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, a little like when you're doing architectural solutions, you have to be a little analytical about it. So,
but it's almost like you're describing the designing with models. That's what's nice about models, is it's so you can take big physical chunks and move them around, kind of like rearranging songs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I do that, like now I do that a lot. I mean, it's in a way, it's taken me longer to write songs because now I kind of miss having, I miss having the confidence in just writing a one-off and just leaving it at that and saying that's good as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now I try a lot of different approaches, and I think the end result's better. It just means it takes longer, and I can drive my bandmates a little crazy sometimes. I'll change songs after we've been playing them. Like, hey, let's cut this part down, or let's get rid of this part. This is the actual the chord change under the solo is the best part. Let's actually write a new song and make that the verse. Actually, like there's no reason you can't do that kind of stuff.
Now, do you find that recording all your rehearsals is really a crucial part of that for you to be able to listen back and re-understand the song?
Yeah. I definitely recorded a lot of the rehearsals with my own band, the Aerosols. I've definitely started doing that, and just to hear, when you're singing and playing guitar, you're kind of, I'm just focusing on not screwing up, and I'm not really. You're only able to hear a certain amount of stuff, like objectively in the moment. So to hear playback is great. To just like, is this song even working? Does it sound weak? Does it sound, is it coming across? Like definitely. And doing demos. I mean, doing demos is really, that's kind of where I develop songs.
Yeah.
I started doing that more and more and more, like as opposed to just bringing a song to a band. Because I mean, you can have a great, or great, whatever you might think it's a great. I
think melody, everything you're doing is great, man.
like a melody and a chord change that's catching your ear that you think's decent enough, and you bring it to a band. It's like, this is like it's boring, or
right, or it doesn't,
and maybe
it doesn't reproduce the same way with other people playing it necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in order to save time, like I've realized, like I just have to save my bandmates time instead of getting them to reapproach a song multiple times and dumping songs that we've all learned carefully. I mean, I did that a lot in the early parts of the band, the Aerosols. Like, there's so many rejected songs that the band put time into them, and they don't want to reject them. They sound fine to them.
Right.
But yeah, so I think demos is definitely, I mean, it takes a while, but it definitely helps. And then, because I think a lot of what makes songs is the combination of instruments, especially I've come to kind of realize that the bass line and the guitar like really make the song. And these are not, I do a lot of bass lines that are not root note bass lines. They are like a melody themselves. So which is kind of more of a 60s, 80s kind of bass line. Like the 90s, like all became about the root note kind of. But everybody's do 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 do, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of what that's kind of where I think a lot of kind of exciting songs can happen is that combination.
Well, there's an interplay between the instruments when the bass starts playing melodies, and also the bass doesn't always have to add the low end in every moment.
Right. I love bass lines that are kind of that aren't afraid to go up high and kind of and mix in with the guitar. That's a great thing about a lot of 80s music, because sometimes with some of these bands, like early REM, there's a lot of that where there's some notes where you have to really listen closely. Like it's a clean guitar and a bass line, like really crisp bass, and you're like, which one's the guitar, which one's the bass? They're all kind of creating a harmony together.
Yeah,
and
I seem to recall that we discovered the Rickenbacker for a great bass with a pick back then too.
Oh yeah. I have a Rickenbacker now. Yeah,
do you?
I love it. I just got kind of lucky and got a 70s one, and
that's great.
And it's great. And I kind of try to, with my band, the Aerosols, I really always tried to push, like Josh, our bass player, like do something up high, do something up high. And it wasn't his like default, but that was always my kind of like go-to place for the bass.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about moving the bass up high like that is that then when you drop low again, all of a sudden it's a big deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The contrast. Right.
Yeah. All right. So Rockstars, I have a definition of the gunny sack for you, and for you, Dave, because I know you're listening.
Yeah. He's going to listen to this, he said.
All right. Here we go. A burlap sack. I'm going to start over. I already butchered it.
Okay. Yeah.
A burlap sack or gunny sack, also known as a gunny shoe or toe sack, is an inexpensive bag traditionally made of Hessian fabric, parentheses burlap, formed from jute, hemp, or other natural fibers. Modern-day versions of these sacks are often made from synthetic fabrics such as polypropylene. So here's the funny thing, Joe and Dave.
Yeah, you have to look up. Yeah.
So burlap, what do you think all the sound treatment was made from in all the classic studios like Motown and Muscle Shoals and Stax and all these places? It was insulation covered in burlap for sound panels. So you guys were way ahead of the times there.
Yeah. Singing about it, just knowing it was out there. It was in the air.
It was in the air, indeed.
I saw that Motown studio, at least their version of it. I mean, I don't know how much. It probably got taken apart and then recreated sometime I saw it in the 2000s, and it was just a big room.
Yeah. It was originally a photography studio.
Oh, okay. Right.
And I think the floor is like a soft wooden floor so that the tripods could kind of dig in and lock in place really easily. And that had a particular sound to it as well.
That's the mic tripods or?
No, the camera tripods.
You mean
day.
for when it was used as a camera studio. Okay,
exactly.
I got you.
And I mean, this is what I remember anyway. And then the camera tripods had sharp feet on them that could easily sink into the soft wood so that they wouldn't move on you once you set them.
Right.
And apparently that soft wood was part of what made the sound cool, along with other things.
I got you.
I think musicianship probably helped too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The rhythm section. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. If you're ready to upgrade your studio to the famous sound of API's large format consoles, then you're ready for the Box, a small format console featuring the same analog circuitry and original 2520 op-amp design that made API famous for more than 50 years. Record through 8 world-class mic pre-channels, mix through 24 smooth as glass faders, and upgrade your home studio to legendary status. API now offers a virtual console experience, allowing you to get a personalized online demo of the Box at apiaudio.com. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A7V monitor with rotatable HPS waveguide for the accelerated ribbon tweeter and advanced onboard DSP-based room correction using the included A-Control software or optional SonarWorks software and measurement mic, allowing you to tune your speakers for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. All right, well, let's see here. What else do I want to jump into? Let's talk a little bit about your 4-track. So I remember you having, as I recall, I think you had the same 4-track that we had in my high school. I actually had an introduction to a 4-track. I was very lucky to have a music school teacher who had come from Berkeley, and he set up a closet as a little 4-track studio. And that was my very first introduction. But but it was that Yamaha 100 or something like that, right?
You know, I looked it up yesterday. It's the MT44.
Okay, awesome.
Yamaha from 1983. It was a weird, huge thing that I bought off of a bass player friend of mine from San Francisco, and I brought it. I had that thing for years. It had a built-in like 7-band EQ, 4 tracks onto cassette. Each track had just one tone knob, a volume knob, a pan, and this special effect. And then there was a master for the special effect, and it was this really horrible echo, like.
Oh, that's great.
So if you did just a tiny bit, you'd get. If you just turned it up a tiny bit on a track, you'd get kind of a decent, barely decent reverb. But if you turned it way up, it sounded like kind of like a whippet, kind of like, you know, when the whippets really kick in. So
you mean when everything sounds like the $6 Million Man theme song all of a sudden?
Exactly. So that was my first multi-track that I owned. A friend of mine in high school had one of those Tascam Porta ones. Porta One Studios, and those are great. Like probably better. Who knows? But there's all sorts of variety out there. But I will say this about that MT44. I'm looking at a picture of it right now. It is just a gorgeous thing. I mean, like, so it's the way they built it is like a mixer and a cassette deck all in one. So flat in front of you is like a mixer with the faders on it, and you've got like EQ and other stuff. And then over on the right, it actually has a patch bay, believe it or not. The 1/4-inch patch bay is great, and some RCAs. Yeah, and so you could patch out to while you're mixing, patch out to an effects loop or
a guitar pedal or something.
Yeah.
That's badass. Right. And then up top is like this cassette deck where you've got the control and the meters. But this beautiful detail over on the right, it looks like there's just a storage drawer for all your master cassettes to live.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. That was kind of a little bit of a maybe waste of space, but yeah, and this thing was big, but it was very versatile. So that's kind of I kind of
Did you eventually let it go?
I did. It started I used it for a long time and I recorded the first couple a couple Dirt Cousin tapes on it with Dave, like in the 90s, just maximizing our tracks. Like we only had 4 tracks. It was horrible at bouncing, so you couldn't bounce at all. So you had to get good at recording. If you wanted to get more than 4 tracks, you'd get 2 tracks going. I'll play guitar, Dave, you play bass, and we're going to go into 1 track. And I think I had this other sub mixer.
Dude, that's so Motown of you. You didn't even know. That's exactly what they did in Motown.
Oh, is that what they did?
Yeah, they blended the guitar and the bass together on one
Yeah.
tube mixer and put it down to a track.
Yeah, and what you do is you had to do two. This is now I'm remembering this. I actually forgot that I do this. You'd get two instruments that EQ wise were pretty different from each other, so that because once you got them on there, the relative volume between them was set, right? They were on one track together.
Yeah,
you can't isolate them and turn one up, but you could turn the tone up. You know, if you wanted the guitar louder, you know, once you got all the other instruments on there and you realize, oh shoot, when I did the guitar and bass, the bass was a little too quiet. Well, then you could turn the tone down on that track and get a little more bass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through the EQ, you could like bring one of them up or another and kind of trick the thing out a little bit. So it's just like weird little things like that you learn when you're really limited with what you have, like little workarounds. Like that's kind of what I've had to do a lot of the time. Cause I never had like a real console or, you know, reel to reel until like much more recently.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, of course, now these days we have artificial intelligence robots to go in and just do all that stuff for us.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
mastering.
So let me back up a sec. So this is actually what screwed up our connection a moment ago. But we're back. I clicked over here because we've got a link in the show notes, Rockstars, some of the Aerosol's early recordings, which are all from that 4-track, right? So if it hurts, take it down, Satan's sheet music, crying all the way home. Are those from that era?
Yes. So those are all recorded on that tape player. And that's kind of, let's see, that's the last big thing I recorded on there. And it was breaking down a lot, but that's all from there. And that's with some friends. At that point, I was living in San Francisco, and that was kind of like that band just started as a home recording project where my philosophy was like, let's not limit ourselves to like what sounds like a live band. Let's just kind of create stuff in the studio that it might be really layered. It might be really hard to recreate live, but it is what it is. So that was that project. So that was really fun. Yeah.
Now I do have another question that's relevant before we move on to your newer studio setups. When we were in St. Louis, you also did a thing that was incredibly remarkable to me, which is you decided one day, you know what, I'm going to get a whole bunch of bands together and we're going to do a cover compilation of Schoolhouse Rock.
Right.
So tell us about that project, because that was just so awesome the way that turned out and what you did. And I think, didn't you record one of the cuts for that on your 4-track back then as well?
I might have recorded my own. Yeah, I contributed one song. That was actually Chris King's idea, the whole tape to do a compilation to Schoolhouse Rock.
Was it really? Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was originally his idea. And then I was actually... I was in San Francisco and just kind of like, I was at a weird time where I was like open to anything. I'd already been living here for a while and like was ready to maybe be the big fish or a little fish in a small pond again, as opposed to a little fish in a big pond. So Chris had that idea and he was like, and we got this apartment room opened up, $100.
Was that the Marconi house?
Yeah, Marconi. Yeah, in the hill. So I went back.
Can you describe that living arrangement? Also,
that house.
Also, you might have to mention the dryer. You might have to mention the dryer.
What was the story with the dryer? Wait, I'm forgetting.
So, I was in another band with Dave Melson called Green Eggs and Spam, and our drummer, who had the monster drum kit that went all around. Robert Silverman, Rob, if you're listening, shout out to you. So his basement flooded during one of the days we were over there for a band practice, and we had to rush down there and evacuate all the instruments from the basement rehearsal space while the sewage was backing up into the basement, and it got my boots wet. And I came over, and I think I was staying with you guys at the Marconi house, and in my typical maybe not so thoughtful manner, I was like, oh, well, I'll just dry my boots in the dryer in the basement. And I think shortly after that, you were certain that I had broken your dryer by putting my boots in there.
Oh, I don't remember this at all. Wow. Wow.
I'm an archive of all the drama.
Yeah. Oh man, that basement. Okay, that's another. Yeah, that basement was kind of scary. Anyway.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Why was Marconi scary as a house and a place to live?
Oh, geez. Well, because we're surrounded by guys who either were in the mob or wanted us to think they were in the mob. I remember it was the Italian neighborhood in St. Louis, which was very, very. They had very strong feelings about preserving their neighborhood while the rest of the city kind of was going through a lot of changes, a lot of suburban flight, and so Chris and I can't remember who else was living there when I moved in, but he'd already been living there a couple of years, and I think his band Enormous Richard had been playing there, and they got somebody from the church or something came over and was like, "You guys got to stop playing. You woke up the Monsignor. Don't make us send Sal over." Just these kind of like kind of not so veiled, I guess, threats or whatever.
Yeah. So, but it was also the house itself was had been a funeral home.
Oh, I'm forgetting that. You're right. Yeah, because the basement. Yeah. Man, you're remembering these details that
they're all coming back to my mind. Now.
Yeah. Because the basement had this huge, cold, just concrete. It was tall too. And that was the story, that it was a funeral home. It was right across the street from the church.
Yeah, I'm sure the basement was where all the the bodies were going.
Oh man!
Before people were just breaking dryers with dirty boots.
Yeah. Oh Lordy. I can't believe you did that. Where all the spirits were still dwelling, Elijah.
I know, thumping around. You thought it was the spirits coming from the basement. But I apologize. I promised I would digress like hell on this interview.
Right.
So I thank you for your patience in advance here.
Sure. So what were we talking about?
Well, let's see. You had all your 4-track days, and you and then eventually you switched over and migrated or upgraded to something else.
Yes. Yeah. That thing finally, it died a long, slow death. I mean, I repaired it like 40, 50 times. And then, so I bought a Tascam TSR 8.5-inch 8-track. And I have to admit, I bought it and didn't use it for 2 years because once again, and I bought a Mackie 1604 VLZ, the workhorse, whatever they call it,
right?
Mixer, and that was my setup. But I was so intimidated by even that low grade level of technology that I didn't use the stuff for a couple of years. I just it was just it takes me a while to get comfortable. So I finally started using that stuff, and that's what I recorded the Aerosol's second and last albums on. Actually, I got rid of the Mackie and upgraded to an Allen and Heath Z420, which is a bit better. It's got a warmer sound. I don't think Mackies are really meant to record on. I'm sure all the studio pros listening are kind of rolling their eyes. But yeah,
not necessarily. My first one was a 1604 VLZ or whatever they called it. And that's what I took as a portable studio with Chris when we would tour all over the country and go record people in the 90s. And then the first studio I was at, Alex the Great, they had a 32 channel Mac keyboard and definitely made a lot of records on that got a lot of attention.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So so don't feel bad about it.
Yeah. It's what happens when you read your gear slots and there's just these people who just poo-poo stuff so badly. And then you realize, or you start thinking man, was I an idiot to have ever bought that? But I mean, that would be a great thing to travel with because that's, I think, what they're good. That's definitely, they're sturdy.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, and they're not as large as some of the other consoles. But so my setup now is, this setup, just a home studio in San Francisco in our basement, literally. And it's pretty modest. I mean, I only have, I think, 5 mics, maybe.
Nice. What mics do you have? Do you remember?
I have, I wrote them down here.
I've got the blue one and the black one and the silver one that's a little bit scraped up.
Yeah, I mean, I always had crappy mics like back in college. Like I don't even know what those mics were. They were mics that my dad was always recording stuff. Like I think he was a psychiatrist, so he'd record some of his sessions with his patients, and I think I inherited some of that stuff. So, but finally, got a couple SM58s or 68s. I always get them mixed up, but those are my first like mics I think I ever bought, and then got a was recording with those for a while. Those aren't. Then upgraded to a condenser mic, like an SM98, which is a very weird mic. I think that Megan Gohill recommended one time.
Is that a really small one?
It is. No. It's very high end. It's like, I mean, I'm not high end as in expensive. It's very trebly. So I used that on the first Aerosols record mixed with some SM58, and then I thought like, okay, mixing that was such a chore. I'm going to solve all my problems by I'm going to finally spend a lot of money. I got a Neumann TLM 103, and it is like okay, but not. I don't think they make them the way they used to. I guess it's kind of so. I have that. I think I'm going to get rid of that one. It's got a lot of sibilance problems that really bugged me. And the last record I made, just it added so much mixing time because of that. You've noticed that yourself? Is that what they're known for?
No, not particularly. But I think one of the things that you might experience, which I feel like I'm experiencing too, is we start out with something as modest as a Shure SM57, and then we spend a lot of time, a lot of years, certain that we're supposed to be that we're using the wrong thing. We're supposed to get something better. And eventually we circle around to realizing that the mic we started out with in the beginning was a great choice.
Yeah. The 57s aren't bad. I mean, I still use that for the snare and some other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and obviously, of course, practicing like live, but I actually, the mic I'm speaking through right now is, I like this one a lot, and it's a Audio-Technica 4047. So I use that for a lot of stuff. Like I'm going to start using it for vocals now because it doesn't have the sibilance problem. I use it for guitar amps, for drums, overhead on drums, and bass. I'll use that mixed with for bass amps. I'll actually do the Audio-Technica with an Audix D4, and I'll mix that down to one track.
So
I'll
two
do those
mics on the bass cab.
The Audio-Technica kind of like a little further back, and the Audix kind of close up. And I'll do the Audix on the kick drum too.
Nice.
Yeah, and then blend it later because the Audix gets kind of the punchiness and the definition, but like what the Audio-Technica does when it's kind of moved back a little bit, especially if you've got I've started putting like bass amps, I've been putting bass amps in corners of rooms to
get a little more low end and stuff.
Yeah, you get the low end, you get the boominess, and it sits in the mix. It kind of sits separate in the mix a little better, and it's like not as hard. It doesn't interfere with other stuff as much.
Yeah. Where do you like to put that Audio-Technica mic? So in other words, the condenser's back, just kind of picking up the sound of the bass in the room a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Like about 12, 18 inches, something like that. Like back from the face of the cab.
Have you ever wished you could remove the click-track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I have been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks, with a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. You can even adjust your vocal, bass, and drum levels inside of a finished stereo mix using the wizardry of rebalance. RX is truly magical. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars, or use the coupon code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries, and it works great in my studio. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Do you ever notice that if you change that distance from the Audix mic, which is up close, that they start to cancel each other out in weird ways or anything? Or have you just sort of found a sweet spot that tends to work?
Yeah, I've just found that I found that set distance that I do. I haven't yet experimented with that and discovered that. That's interesting to know that might happen. Yeah.
Well, low frequencies can either add and subtract. You know, if you want to put on your science hat,
right,
you can start thinking about it. I mean, sometimes it's helpful to think about that stuff. Mostly it's not. Mostly it's helpful to just listen and go, when that sounds good, mark it. But what about, are you familiar with phase and polarity yet? Have you had the phase flip switch on a console or anything like that?
I haven't had it on a console. I know that's I'm trying to remember now. The issue with that is, God, I'm actually forgetting. Yeah. I know that can happen with 2 mics, right?
Yeah. Because the lows they might either add up between the 2 mics, or they may be canceling. One's trying to make the speaker go out, the other one's trying to make the speaker go in at the same time. And you end up with nothing. But then if you have a polarity switch, which is the circle with the line through it, it just flips the positive and negative of one of those tracks. So that now it's just like we're going back to math problems.
Yeah. See, that's the kind of stuff where my brain hasn't grabbed that stuff that easily, so I have to learn from trial and error, which has taken longer.
Yeah. Well, fortunately for you, there's at this point about 700 to 800 hours of Recording Studio Rockstars interviews that are just waiting for you. When you got nothing else to do.
Yeah. Right.
Well, cool, man. Well, so let's see. So you switched over now the tape machine that you have now, the Tascam TSR8. It's a 1/2-inch 8-track reel-to-reel.
Right.
And are you still recording stuff on that? And which one of the records that we've got links to would be an example of that?
So that one was done. So as far as the Aerosols records, the Fake Mirror and Room for Wrong. So the last 2, and they're spread out over a lot of time because, but
cool.
Those 2, the self-titled one, which I think I just sent you 3 songs from, the self-titled debut CD was done on the Mackie on the old Yamaha cassette.
Cool. Recorded. And then we got some great videos in the links too, Rockstar. So here's one, the Aerosols Sleeping on the Dance Floor. Tell us a little bit about that track.
So that track, that one came together I first had the bass line basically, and that intro, and it was kind of an intro that I liked enough, but it was looking for a song, and that song literally took me. I tried so many different things with that intro, adding it on to different ideas. It took months to finish that song, and it's a simple song. The thing is, hopefully you can't tell it took months to write it, but it's just nothing. I tried a lot of different stuff and nothing was catching. And I tried stuff, did a lot of demos. I've got some weird versions of that song, but finally, after a lot of trial and error, came up with something that me and the band liked. So
Right on.
So that's, yeah.
Well, you
yeah,
guys
yeah.
made a cool video about it too. Tell us a little bit about making a video, because to me, I haven't had enough experience making videos for original music, a music video. I've edited together video of an actual band performance together, and that is tons of fun. But
Right.
what were some things that you learned about making a music video, and like what were some fun aspects of that?
Yeah, so that video was made by my wife Amy, who also plays in my band, and she has her band Latitude, and so she had worked on she grew up doing video stuff, had worked on some other people's videos, had made videos for a couple of her songs earlier on, and so I knew that she knew what she was doing. She came up with good ideas. I kind of had a rough outline for the concept of the song. I mean, the lyrics they're definitely vague, but it's a little bit about like oligarchs just kind of destroying stuff,
Right.
and like buying stuff and destroying it, like just kind of having fun, not realizing it. And so that was the general concept, like as vague as that is, or as sketchbook as that is. And so I had some ideas, visual ideas, but the challenge is always like, can you make these things happen with the props you have? Can you do it without spending, tons
Like
of
if
money?
you're trying to tell a story in a video.
Yeah, yeah, and how literal do you want to get it too? Like, so she kind of, I told her the concept, and then she was like, well, instead of doing this, why don't we try that? And instead of doing this, like, this might be easier to do and maybe more effective, like visually, that kind of stuff, like kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. And I mean, I always I can get pretty like I can hold on to ideas for, like, and think like, oh, it's, this, we're losing the concept. But like, I always kind of end up, almost always, and in this case, definitely end up like liking the result more than what my original concept was, because it's a mix of my ideas and hers. So so she did some special effects, as you'll see. She's just good at like scouting out, like, how do I do a laser effect? How do I do like this weird citadel spinning in a box effect?
Oh, right. That's in Summer Lasers, right? Which is that was the other video I was going to bring up. That one's great. Yeah. And I think that's a more recent one. In Rockstars, we actually, Joe shared that per my request. I'll be honest. I asked you to share it because I knew it was cool and I wanted it in our Facebook group. So Rockstars, if you're listening to this and you're not in the Facebook group yet, just go to Facebook. As long as that's still there and we're still doing it, go to Facebook and then just search Recording Studio Rockstars. Ask to join the group, and we've got a dialogue going there about music and videos and whatever else we want to talk about. But make sure to answer the 3 questions or else you won't get in. That's how you keep all the spam out. But Joe, you went and shared that in there, and it's right. A really cool video, and it's got a great little storyline. And who's the evil character in there?
Oh, that's a friend of ours, Josh Miller, who he's a music friend we've known him for years, and we saw his acting abilities, and his own band did a video, his band Outer Embassy, and we're like, we got to use Josh.
Nice. Is he genuinely evil?
He's not. He's actually not at all. He's just good at facial expressions. Nice. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if did you ask earlier about the other video?
Well, it's no worries at all. But Sleeping on the Dance Floor is one video we've got, and then another is Summer Lasers, and they're both very cool.
Yeah, I did Sleeping on the Dance Floor. I did that one in iMovie, and I had to do that really fast because the record was getting released, and Amy was really busy and didn't have time to finish her Summer Lasers video. So I just did mine really fast, and it's very it's pretty goofy, but I was happy with how it came out.
I dig it, man. It looks like you guys are playing an in-store show at the end. There's a clip from it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're playing in a bookstore, and it's funny. I wanted to the rhythm section is no longer with us from that band, Josh and Raul, but I wanted them in the video, and I just happen to have live footage where we're actually playing at the same speed, so I was able to sync it up perfect.
Oh, nice!
And like have those guys be in the video, and it was just kind of like, it worked out. That was very lucky.
Now, when you reshot, when you did the Lasers video with Amy, is one of the things, maybe you already knew about it, but I feel like one of the things to discover about making a music video is learning, if we're going to play along, somebody's got to play this song, jam it loudly out of a jam box while we play along so that we're in sync somehow. And then you kind of use that as your guide to edit it down and make sure that the guitar strummings are happening at the right time. Or you end up with one of those videos where the drum fills never seem to match up to the actual recording, right?
Right. Those could be pretty fun. But cool we definitely were, playing along so that we'd be in time, all that stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the ways you like to record stuff in your studio. So what's you may have tried lots of different ways, but you're a great drummer and you always get really cool drum sounds. Talk about some of the things that you've learned about how you like to record drums. And I will also point out, just a reminder that the Latitude records, let me see, I got so many tabs open here to find it. But there's, in our Spotify playlist, Rockstars, we've got a couple of Latitude records. Mystic Hotline, I think you said, is a new one. Is that's you playing drums on those as well?
Yes. Yeah. I'm the drummer in that band.
Nice,
oh, cool.
Nice,
Thanks.
Nice playing.
Yeah.
So talk about playing drums in the studio. What have you learned about how to get a good sound, how to get a good performance, all that?
Yeah. So at first I was, recording Raul, our drummer, on drums. And I basically, my philosophy is if you have a good, getting a good drum recording is really important to just the song. It's the hardest thing to do. And it's the most important thing to do, I think, because it's so much of the sound of a song. And like, if you get a well-recorded drum set, it's so much easier to mix everything around it too. So I've always focused on that. And out of all the drums, the snare is the number one, I think the most important. Basically, the snare is the most important thing you record in any song is my thinking. I don't always do it well, but I've kind of gotten it better.
You're in good company here, man.
Okay. Yeah. I put, just like the bass amp, the way I record the bass amp where I put it in the corner of the room, I have the drums coming out of the corner of a room too, which was an idea a friend gave me where I put up a blanket behind it. It's a carpeted room, a drywall. We don't have any sound baffles up except for over the windows. But so behind the drums are a blanket hanging up. So we're getting the combination of kind of dry and a little bit of live from the corner, the corner of the room, kind of getting a tiny bit of like a short, very short kind of slap back. It's very subtle. And then I do just one overhead. That's the Audio-Technica, kind of aimed mostly down. It's above the drums, aimed down at an angle from front. Like it's kind of sitting above the bass drum, up about like 60 inches, something like that. And then the Audix is in the kick. And then I do two mics on the snare. And that's the whole setup. I'll do one mic, SM58 above the snare, like the way they mic snares in clubs. Mm-hmm. And then I actually use the Neumann. The Neumann's been relegated to being under the snare to get the crunch. I have to have that crunch. Like that is really important to me. And then, so I got 4 tracks and then I submix later on.
Where do you feel like you get what you want out of the kick drum, and what are your thoughts about kick drums and where they belong?
Where the mic belongs, or where where
just
the
sonically?
Where it belongs in the room, you mean?
Yeah, or like sonically, where do you like a kick drum to be in a mix of a song? You just revealed that the snare is a really important element.
Right.
Is the kick like a supporting player to the snare, or is it something that's meant to be?
Yeah, definitely. The snare is definitely like, I want a thick, kind of crunchy snare. And I like them tuned low just to get them thicker. The kick is gonna be, I don't like them tuned too high. I don't like hearing, like the Metallica Lars Ulrich kind of hearing the pedal hit the head.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not into that. I mean,
You're not taping quarters to the beater side of the head.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that's one extreme. And I like them. I like them pretty bassy. I mean, I have a Ludwig, so it's like a '60s Ludwig set, so it's not the bassiest. It's kind of a garagey sounding drum set. So to make up for that, I EQ in some lows, definitely, and EQ out some mids on the kick.
And those are mostly coming from your single overhead mic from the 4047, the Audio-Technica.
It's coming from that and the Audix. I have the Audix D4 going in, like sticking into
inside
the hole.
The kick. Oh, okay,
yeah,
great. I'd missed you saying that. So
yeah, I have two heads, and I got a hole in the outer head, and then the mic just barely sticks into there, so it gets kind of the attack.
Yeah.
And so and then definitely you get a lot of kick from the overhead too. The overhead's getting everything, and it's kind of filling in. It's like the close mics, like are getting some of the definition, and then the overhead's kind of gluing everything together. And I overdrive a little bit the overhead mic, definitely a little bit.
What's the mic preamp that you would be using for a setup like this?
It is. I got to look at my notes here because I forget this stuff. Universal Audio, the Solo 610, which, once again on Gear Selects, they're like, well, they don't make them like they used to. Those things suck. But I mean, I'm happy with it. So
so it's one of those. The 610's a great mic preamp.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah,
tube pre, right? And is it? But it's not the one that has a compressor built into, or it is the combination of a mic pre and a compressor. Let
me look. Hold on one second.
I think if it's the Solo, maybe it's just the one.
Classic vacuum tube. Yeah, just Solo. I don't think it has a compressor, so I have to. I compress like later on. I have kind of a crappy Alesis compressor that I keep 3630? Telling myself. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think of those?
Man. They're great, dude. We were making all kinds of records. I reluctantly traded mine with a friend for some plugins years ago, and then he came and collected the compressor much later, and I was like teary eyed as I let it go.
Okay, I mean maybe they're fine. I don't. I shouldn't be. I just have my own frustrations with my stuff, and I shouldn't be bad mouthing it, but I do end up with the vocals, and maybe this is just me being crazy, but I ride the vocals a lot, even with the compressor on. Like I ride them so I end up doing the basics on the 4-track. I'm sorry, the 8-track. And then I bounce, put it all onto Pro Tools and take it from there and do overdubs there, and the mix down there. And so I'll ride, when I was like the first two Aerosols records were kind of recorded. I wasn't writing volume levels really in Pro Tools yet. So I was actually doing it in the mixer in real time, doing it on my board. I'd know, like, I'd get to know the song well enough to know that, like, oh, my one word kind of drops off at the end of this line. And I would just sit there and like literally be writing. And that was the challenge of the mix, like getting that right. So now, even with the 3630, I was doing that, and I'm still doing it in Pro Tools. Like I will like, and maybe you do that too. I don't know. I like, you look at the vocal track, and it's like up and down and up and down and up and down, like the levels. But at least now I don't have to do it in real time. I can do it, and it stores it.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's one of the cool things about it. And the beauty of hearing you describe it is, you describe it as almost like a simple hack, but the truth is, I mean, that's how all the records were made back in the day. And it's one of the ways that things can sound really great is when we actually put in the effort to just, adjust the levels in that simple manner and make sure that the balances are right. A lot of times we lean on, the hack of having a compressor that's going to do all that for us.
Right.
And compressors can definitely get stuff to sound great, but I think more often than not, we lean on them more than we need to. We hope that it'll just sort of do everything for us when, truthfully, just riding some faders around is a great way to get things to sound awesome.
Right. Yeah. It just takes more work.
It does.
Yeah. It drives me crazy. I mean, it takes me a long time to mix. So,
yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So then, So your drums are essentially, do you like having the drums be a mono sound, or do you sometimes have ways to make the drums stereo?
Yeah, I don't do stereo too much. The only thing I'll do is I will end up I'll end up bouncing down the drums while still on tape because they're taking so many tracks, and um so just so I have room for everything else before for the basics. So what I'll do sometimes is if I want the flexibility later on, I'll have the submixed drum track, the new track, right? Where all the 4 tracks are submixed on there. And then I'll keep either one of the snare mics tracks, one of the solo snare tracks, or the overhead. And I'll keep that one. So I'll basically just have 2 drum tracks left. And then when I go into Pro Tools, those 2 are still independent of each other. And I can, if I want, I think I've done it on some tracks where I'll like have one of this, I'll have the submixed drum track down the middle. I never really push it, to one side or the other just to have balance. And then I'll maybe take that like one isolated snare track and maybe move that to the right, and mix that in so if somebody's listening with headphones, they're getting something. It's like, I don't know if they don't know what it is, if it's even noticeable, but I'll just kind of do that sometimes. Yeah. But or if it's the overhead, I might move it over to the right. So that's kind of all I do. Sometimes I'll overdub in I think there's one song on Room for Wrong. Yeah. Where I overdub for a guitar break. I overdubbed I didn't even tell Raul I did this, our drummer, but I doubled his drum track. Like I actually got on the drums.
You called up Paul McCartney beforehand. You're like, hey, Paul, tell me how you did that again on those sessions.
Yeah, exactly. How did you piss Ringo off? So yeah, I doubled, and then I had that panned over so that you get that kind of spatial kind of.
Yeah, the dual drum thing is a really cool sound.
Yeah.
So Rockstars, that record, again, the link is in the show notes. So go listen to that one. And that, I think the link takes you over to Bandcamp or something.
Right.
We're talking about, Room for Wrong. Very, very cool stuff. So let's talk about another thing that is so great about the music you record, Joe, is your guitars just sound awesome to me all the time. Cool. So talk a little bit, let's go there next. What is your guitar combo that you're enjoying? Maybe you switch in and out of a lot of things, but talk about that for a second, then talk about how you like to put a mic up and record the guitars when you're playing. Although, I feel a little bit remiss though, because, you talked about drums being really important, and I forgot to ask you a couple of key things before we get to guitars. Sorry about that. I told you I'd go in circles here.
That's fine.
What are some things that help you make sure that you get a solid drum takedown before you move on to the rest of it? I know you as a great drummer, so do you just sit down at the drums and just think in your head and just play it perfectly from start to finish? Or do you have other things that help you kind of patch things together? I like to ask this Shakespearean question: to click or not to click? As far as click track,
I do click. I actually, I do. I was really against it for a long time, and then I was in a band where our drummer needed it, and I saw that once you have it, it's like the editing is so much easier later on if you need to edit anything like digitally in and out. So I definitely click. I'm fairly steady, but I think I just got in the habit of it. So yeah, so the click is on there on the recording, and to prep, I have to have played the song a bit and work out the fills. There's always that thing of I'll be pretty conservative, like on Latitude, the recordings. I'll be conservative with the fills because it
makes for a better final product.
It does. Yeah, it does. And you're not distracting from folks.
Go back and listen to the Cars.
Oh yeah. That's funny because I actually a friend in town, Raj, this great drummer, once said like, "You play like David Robinson of the Cars." I was like, I've never heard that before, but yeah, I mean, he's a really efficient, just kind of punchy drummer, and like that's kind of my aim, I guess. So yeah, I try to keep it simple. I try to actually think of some of the fills ahead of hand, so I don't have like a brain meltdown in the middle of the recording, and which will still happen. I mean, it takes me a few takes.
Yeah. I thought I had a monopoly on all the brain meltdowns when I play drums over here.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I do them. I've been recording some recent drums for some upcoming Latitude songs, and yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody knows you can psych yourself out, and you have to find that one moment where you're kind of just rolling with it and like do a couple takes, like while you're feeling good about it,
yeah,
and not like let the stress hit you. But yeah, so that's kind of what I do to prep. And mixing the drums, I'll usually, definitely put on some other records to kind of like help, like get my relative, like have something to compare to. I definitely will do that.
Oh, that's cool. So like an inspiration, something as a reference track.
Yeah. And like cause I'm not the quickest mixer. I kind of have trouble getting my relative, like my bass line, maybe I'm using that term, not the bass guitar, but just like your bass line, like where your center of gravity is with mixing. I can be a little off some days, and I'll listen to a mix I did a couple days ago and I'll be like, what the hell was I thinking? Like the bass is way too loud. So it just helps while I'm mixing to kind of like put on a record real quick, like put on a Cheap Trick record that I think's mixed well, and just A/B, like do a few different, comparisons, A being my stuff to other people's stuff.
Yeah. What are you using for speakers and headphones and things when you mix? How do you have like a consistent way you like to listen to judge whether it's sounding right to you?
Yeah, I kind of am breaking one rule in playback, in that I'm playing through a system that's very colored. Unfortunately, I have this. It's a receiver from the 70s, a Concept 6.5, and it's pretty it's pretty trebly, so it kind of throws me off. And I haven't always. Amy, my wife, got some good headphones to kind of fix a problem that we had earlier. I was using some what are these things? I was using some headphones that also were very trebly. So the combination of the receiver and the headphones was like would throw me off a bit. So right. She just got these. What are these? Hold on.
So if the receiver is really trebly and the headphones are trebly,
yeah,
then it's likely to make things sound too dark, and then you go listen somewhere else, and you're like, why is it so muddy?
So totally, and yeah. So that was a problem. So I do take the mixes, make an MP3 of them. I used to go to my car when I was doing tape, test mixes. I'd go to the car and listen to them on my car stereo and
with the cassette.
Yeah, just try to get in the, I'd be leaning over to the middle of the car because I don't want to just get the left channel. So I do that a lot. So it's always like mix and playback on a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
Listen on your phone. Listen on. We have this like it's a Fluence like digital playback that's just like uses Bluetooth. I listen to that a lot and get to know the playback's weaknesses and strengths. Like, I know that the Bluetooth Fluence thing really booms, but like accentuates the bass. So you kind of like, so you're listening to all these different playbacks and you're trying to come up with the mix where things don't sound horrible on any one of them. You're kind of like averaging out everything. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So it's a lengthy process, but so that's what I do. So our our headphones that she got recently are Sennheiser HD 280 Pros, and
cool.
They sound a lot less colored than what I was using before, and thank God it'll probably save me some time mixing.
50 years ago, William G. Dilley introduced the world to his revolutionary new dynamics processor, the Model 610 Complementer. A truly unique device, the Model 610 was not only the fastest, cleanest, and quietest of its type, but was also capable of providing completely separate peak limiting and compression functions. Today, Spectra 1964 introduces the Model C610 Complementer, described as the most versatile piece of audio gear you can buy. Great for adding control and power to everything from vocals, guitars, and bass to mixing and even mastering, the C610 gives you the same massive sound that rocked legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant. It even has enough gain to function as a mic preamp. I'm using the C610 on every record I make at the Toy Box Studio, and you should too. You'll love it. Go to spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version were they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming full resolution audio so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or the computer back at the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and you also get A/B listening capability with synchronized playback and level matching for easy mix comparison, all inside Samply. It's file sharing that was built specifically for music, and it all works inside your browser with no downloads required. Sign up now for your free account with 25 gigs of storage and unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade at samply.app. I'll give you one other tip. So there's a company called SonarWorks, and they make something called Reference 4. Am I saying that right? But SonarWorks is it basically, if you tell it what kind of headphones you're using, it can put the music through like an opposite EQ curve to give you a sense of a flat response in the headphones. That could be a fun thing for you to just check out and see what you think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then Rockstars, that can go for, if you want to do speakers as well, you can do that in your studio, but you basically use their software with a microphone to shoot out the mix position, and then it makes adjustments for you. And I think it works. It can work remarkably well in headphones because headphones are such a controlled environment between the headphone and your ear that it can really know what to do, you know?
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. It's making up for the gear that you have in a way.
It can help. Yeah. It doesn't mean you'll necessarily like it and better, but it's always worth exploring stuff like that to see what you think.
Right.
And then, you know, that process you're going through of trying it on multiple speakers and listening to it everywhere to make sure it's right. That's classic. I mean, that's what we all do. I still do that, even though I just got like an incredible speaker system in the studio and in the car. I'm just listening to it everywhere. It reminds me a little bit, I think about the architecture thing. And here's my analogy. You kind of need to know what the house you designed looks like at all the different times of day with a different light.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Totally. Yeah. Because, I mean, I think certain systems have built-in compression, and they might bury something or accentuate something that, and I mean, I guess mastering will fix that to a degree, right? Mastering does
it helps.
I guess,
it helps.
Yeah.
But most mastering engineers will tell you, don't bring it to me to fix it. You get it right on your end, and then we'll just do the next bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I try to do that. I spend a lot of time on that. It drives myself and my wife crazy, but I need to get faster at it or get somebody else to do it. That's kind of where the boat starts slowing down.
Have you explored mixing at different volumes? Do you ever pay attention to where the volume knob is when you're mixing?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great idea. I'll bring it down. The playback, I'll bring it down and see like what's disappearing now. Yeah, yeah, that's really important to do that.
Yeah, listen quietly.
Right. And I mean, you need to do that anyway to not tire out your ears too.
Yeah, big
You
time.
can't. You can't have it up really loud the whole time.
You can't know if it rocks when it's down quiet, but you just can't mix at rock level for very long. That's what I find.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Have you discovered the mono switch or the mono button yet?
On my stereo to see how that mixes. I mean, see how it sounds mixed. Yeah. I do that too a lot. Yeah. That makes a big difference. I mean, especially if you're monitoring on headphones, like the stuff panned will appear louder in stereo than when you hit the mono switch. All of a sudden, those things get quieter, just relative volume to everything else.
Yeah,
it's a weird effect. Yeah,
and that the first question is, well, when are we going to listen in mono if we've got stereo? But the truth is, when we walk across the room and we're not right in front of the speakers perfectly, we're beginning to hear what it sounds like in mono that way anyway. And David Thoner, when he was on the podcast, one of my questions to him was about how to mix a rock record so it would sound as good as For Those About to Rock, AC/DC, which he had mixed. And
he mixed that one. Wow.
Yeah, his answer was that's where he kind of taught me the mono trick, which was put your speakers in mono and balance the guitars against the drums like that, and then put it back in stereo, and you'll have a guitar, an appropriate guitar mix. Now, people can push back on those ideas and everything. But what happens is the drums are coming out of the left speaker and the right speaker equally. And that's why it sounds mono up the middle. But the guitars, if you've panned them, one guitar is just coming out of the left, one's just coming out of the right. And so when you, listen in mono or you step back across the room, what you realize is that the drums and bass have two speakers pushing that sound out at a louder, more energy than each guitar does on its own. So you need to compensate for that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That totally makes sense.
Yeah. How about recording guitars and what about your guitar amp combo? How do you get those beautiful Joe Armin tones?
It took a while, to get to, I mean, I listened to some of the old stuff. Like I had some horrible tone earlier. Let's see. So my guitars I have are a weird Telecaster that when I bought it, I was told it was a Telecaster put into a Schecter body, which Schecter is some weird company, I think out of California from the 80s. I don't know if that's true. Like if that was the truth. I bought it off somebody from like an ad. Didn't get it through a store. So I played that for a long time. And then I started getting into Gibson SGs. I got a 70s SG while I was in St. Louis that had humbuckers and just kind of liked, it just sounded like the opposite of the Tele. It was like very kind of almost soft sounding, like the chords. I don't know how to explain it, but like they had this cool quality, like playing bar chords on it. But that thing was pretty limited. And so I traded that in for a 65 or 66, I'm not sure what year, Gibson SG.
Nice.
And man, I got a deal on it. I mean, I don't think the store knew what they were selling me. So
just one of the guests on the show is Craig Parker Adams talking about recording and mixing Zappa. And I just immediately think of that SG about the same time.
He played an SG.
Yeah.
Right. He played an old one, I guess.
Well, yeah. He was like, he was playing the Fillmore East in 1971. So
right.
65 would have been, the guitar you had for the last 6 years.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because when I got this guitar, you look at the back of it and there was some imprint there. Somebody had stickers on it at some point, but it pulled them off and you could still see the imprint if you angled the guitar right in the light. And it looked like they were like 1960s, like flower, like some graphic design of flower petals. Nice. So this thing really lived through the 60s. So that's my main guitar. It's got the old P90 pickups, which I love. So a lot of people, it's funny because I think because of Angus Young and a lot of metal bands, like SGs look like hard rock guitars, but with the P90 pickups, they're really chimey. Like they
Yeah.
sound, I can get this thing to sound like, like almost like the Birds, kind of like if you have the right amp. It really just very chimey, cuts through. It's kind of high output, like, but not like what people think of, like when they think of like humbucker, overdriven kind of thing.
Right. No, I think of Link Ray as more of an inspiration for you.
Yeah. Like Link Ray, get that kind of, where you can hear the string. So that's my guitar. I used to play the Tele through a Marshall JCM, 800 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I got rid of that, and I have a Fender Pro, like a 1969 Fender Pro amp, like a tube. I think it has two 10-inch speakers. So that with the SG is my combo, and like I kind of landed upon that maybe 15 years ago, and I kind of have a hard time straying from it. Like every now and then I'll record with the Tele a little bit, but live I've just gotten I kind of wish I wasn't so used to that, because I'd like to vary things, and it kind of like, honestly, I'm like traveling around with a expensive guitar, which is pretty stupid. Like a lot of the time, like
tricky.
Yeah. So,
well, one of the advantages you have, over being a pro studio all day long is, when you get into the pro studio thing, you start to want to have like everything, and you're always switching and trying different things. And when you can focus on like your one rig, it really gives you a chance to get to know your instrument,
Yeah. Totally.
Know how to get your sound and everything.
Yeah, quicker. Right. I know that's the thing. You go into some studios, like you probably have a bunch of guitars hanging up on the walls, or like, oh, can I try this one? Can I try that one? And that's part of the fun of being in a studio. I kind of it's me and my two guitars. My Amy has a Harmony Rocket, and I did actually use that on one song on the new record, because it was kind of funny. It was an accident that sounded good, where her pickup placement, like it was, you have the two screws where you can rotate the pickup, like as far as proximity to the strings.
Right.
And the screw next to the low E was like wound really tight, so that end of the pickup was really close to the low end, to the low strings, and it was getting this cool overdrive, like by accident, just out of the guitar, even going clean into an amp. And it just sounded, I was like, I like this sound. It sounds so much better than the Tele just for this song. And so I purposely use that. So it's kind of cool to just see if sometimes that fixes that actually fixed like what I wanted out of that song, just getting that kind of
just switching
cool
guitars.
overdrive.
Yeah. What about what are your thoughts on pedals, the sound of a guitar when you go through pedals versus going straight into the amp and getting the gain that way?
Yeah, I limit I don't have a lot of pedals. I just have a couple of electro harmonics pedals. I have a Electric Mistress flanger that I've had for a long time, and that gets kind of like, can get kind of a Leslie sound if you've got the speed up. And it can get, if you slow it down, you can get more of kind of a slow phase. So I'll use that to sometimes accentuate. I'll just kick it on for some parts of songs. And then I also have a, what is it? The delay that they do, the Memory Man or Memory Boy. I always forget which one I have, but I've got the more reduced version. And
probably the Boy.
The Boy, yeah, exactly. I love that thing too. That's great for sometimes, like there's a song on Fake Mirror, the third, Mrs. Jensen, where the guitar is just completely going through the Memory Boy, and it's just got this slap, kind of like ding 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 ding, kind of like what is it, like David Gilmour on The Wall, like that kind of did, and that like kind of makes the guitar line. So yeah, I definitely like delay. I'll kick on reverb and off, because I have a the old Pros come with foot switches where you can kick on and off the vibrato and and reverb. And so I'll do
Yeah.
that sometimes in the middle of songs, sometimes turn the reverb up really high, have it off most of the song, and then just turn it on for like a part of the song, like to kind of make that part stand out.
I think that's good thinking too. And a lot of times it's kind of like mixing actually. It's like a lot of creation in the studio where we get stuck in this sense of thinking, oh, we just need to have like an average of everything that's happening. And then you end up with music and a mix that just sounds like beige, it's not very interesting. Whereas when you start thinking about it more like on off, this bold move versus this bold move, take your reverb and just crank it and just kick it on for certain chords and sections, it's really compelling.
Oh yeah. Like you kind of create like peaks and valleys in the song. I love that kind of recording and mixing. Like I think like Brian Eno did that. Like I don't know if you listen to his like his pop records, like taking Tiger Mountain. Like there'll be some weird thing that might come in just for a second and then it's gone. Or all of a sudden the bridge, like during the bridge of the song, somebody might have turned phase up almost on all the instruments and it sounds like, like hip hop mixing kind of did that a bit, like where one part of the song all of a sudden sounds like it's far away and then it bounces back, I like that kind of stuff. I did stuff like that, like on the first Aerosol CD more than now. It sounds a little more like a live band with overdubs, but like on that more home recording version where the home recorded release, there's more of that kind of stuff where you're shaping the sound a little more with like weird overdubs and maybe one thing's really loud and then it's gone, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I like that suggestion of that approach that says a sound is allowed to make an appearance in a song one time and never again. Because a lot of times we get stuck in this idea, everything has to be a part or a recurring theme or a thread. And it doesn't. You could just have something make one appearance and it was cool and you don't even know how you'd make it again.
Right.
And you don't need to,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love that stuff. I don't do it as much as as much as I'd like to or as much as I used to, but that's fun. That's kind of like adding the color on top of everything else, or you can accentuate a part of the song that way. So
yeah,
definitely.
no, I'm constantly trying to remind myself of things like that too. And I feel like a good learning lesson for me is to accept the first you talked about being careful with the production and the creation of a song, but sometimes we need to balance that out with like letting that first thing that happened be the thing that we use,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like I think once everything's down, then I'm really careful with like the mixing and all that. But in the songwriting process and figuring out how to convey it through the band, I think some of the early ideas are the best ones. And honestly, like accidents, like do work. And even in mixing, accidents work. Like you were asking about Summer Lasers, that song. When we recorded it, I get the drums down first, and then the guitar and the bass are doing scratch tracks, basically because I don't have that many mics and I don't have isolation in my recording setup. So the actual drum take is the first one, and the bass is just literally going into like a DOD distortion pedal just to get a little volume, and then going straight into tape.
Nice.
Through my mixing board, just so I have a reference later on. We record over it later with the mic to amp setup. But while I still had that track, the scratch bass, and I had recorded Josh, our bass player, doing the real bass, and I had those as two separate tracks, and accidentally had the scratch bass on. There's the intro, which is like the bass is doing this kind of harmonic thing up high. And I accidentally had that on. It's like, oh man, that sounds so much better having that weird scratch bass on too.
Right, the distorted bass layering.
Yeah, so I kept it for that song. I would turn it on just during the intro which is the instrumental break, which then reoccurs in the middle of the song. It's like, turn that thing on again. It kind of filled the bass out a little bit. So there's like weird mixing accidents. I'm sure that you come across those, and then also like accidents like writing the song too. Like you might have. I've done a thing where I recorded over an earlier take of the song that was in a different key. Like I used the same tape and recorded again, and then had a vestige of the old. Like I recorded a new version.
Vestigial productions.
Vestigial, like I had a vestige of the old recording and heard them like right by each other, and it's like, oh man, that sounds cool. Like the new recording going into the old recording. Maybe the song should have that weird little coda at the end in a different key. Like stuff like that I've kind of used in songs, just accidents.
Your song had a vestigial tail.
Wait, say it again. Your voice cut out again.
Your song had a vestigial tail.
It did, exactly. From hours past or from weeks ago.
All right, so I got to share two quick anecdotes. So one is episode 88. I had to go back and find it again, but my interview with Van Hunt, who had produced some tracks with me in the studio, and he kind of taught me that idea. Actually, he was doing some overdub, and like a little keyboard riff sounded really cool going into the first chorus or something. And my thought as an engineer was like, oh, cool, we got to redo that and make sure it goes into every chorus. And he was like, no, it's just like totally cool for it to just happen this one time in the song and never again.
Right.
And it stuck with me. I thought that was a really, really great tip.
Yeah.
And then the other anecdote, of course, is I don't have the episode number right in front of me, but we had Bill Demain on the podcast, and Bill had this incredible spoof character named Sterling Huck that would write letters to companies. Prior to email, he'd write into these big corporations with these prank letters. And one of them was writing into the Fruit of Loom and explaining how he was born with a vestigial tail, and he was hoping that they would make a custom pair of underwear for him.
Oh my God. So that term has come up before.
Yeah. Apologies, rock stars, if that's too close to home for anybody. But anyway,
yeah.
I was like connecting the dots here on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Well, all right, cool. Now, what about recording your guitar? What do you like to do to get the right sound? How do you put your mics up with your simple setup?
Yeah, I used to, like with the Dirt Cousin recordings with Dave, we did a couple tapes, and I was a lot more experimental back then. And I would get guitar sounds like, I want this guitar to be mic'd from like across the room to get a little more room sound, instead of adding the room sound later. But that was recording onto the Yamaha, which was, I wasn't doing like effects loops or anything like that in the mix down. So now I'll have the reverb on, the amp reverb is something that's hard to recreate like later. So I'll have that on if it's in the song. But I'll just close mic guitar. Guitar miking is the thing I spend the least time on, just because I have the system. I put the Audio-Technica right in front of one of the speakers, like just a few inches away, and that's it. And like I have overdriven. Like I'll have the Audio-Technica going through the Universal Audio, and there's a couple songs on Fake Mirror where I purposely overdrove. Is that right? The
Sure.
word. Overdrove the guitar.
Overdroven and crying.
Overdroven and crying. Yeah, exactly. I overdrove the guitar using the preamp just to get a sound. And once I did that, I kind of did it by accident first, and I realized, oh man, a lot of people have done this. This is how you get that one sound, the really crisp, like very present guitar.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that on the last record at all. It's definitely more of there's nothing as bright and crispy on the new one. So I just try to get the amp, overdrive it naturally. And just, that's it. It's pretty simple. I might add effects later, in the mix down.
And the mic you would put up as the Audix?
It's actually the Audio-Technica.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. The Audix is really for, like, I use that one more for low end stuff, like just the kick and the bass. For for the guitar, it's the Audio-Technica 4047, which is the one I'm speaking through right now.
Yeah, which is condenser Rockstar. So that's a cool move too. Atom Audio introduces the new A7V monitor for home and pro studios, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. The all-new A-series line of monitors delivers the same highly accurate, transparent sound and unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design that has made Atom Audio famous for over a decade, but now includes new innovations, such as the rotatable high-frequency propagation system waveguide, allowing the XART tweeter to disperse sound with controlled consistency, and DSP-based room correction and speaker voicings. Using the A-Control software or SonarWorks and Measurement Mic, you can now integrate advanced filters directly to the DSP onboard the speaker to help compensate for imperfect room acoustics without introducing annoying latency or requiring plugins. This allows you to tune your monitors for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want to meet your ever-evolving studio needs. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. Look, it might be hard to describe in a few words what gives records a legendary sound, but it would be pretty easy to describe in a few letters: API. For more than 50 years, API Audio has created large format consoles for world-class studios. Famous for co-founder Saul Walker's circuit designs and original 2520 op amp, the sound of API consoles is the sound of great music. API now brings that legendary sound to your home studio with The Box, a small format console featuring the famous API circuitry that is the perfect analog addition to your digital studio. The Box gives you 8 recording channels on the left with built-in mic pre's, high-pass filters, direct inputs, customizable 500 module slots, and 16 summing channels on the right. Or you can mix using all 24 channels, including aux sends, inserts, and silky smooth faders. API now offers a virtual console experience with a personalized online demo of the Box, 16082, or 2448 console. Sign up for your demo now at apiaudio.com. Now, I mean, a lot of classic records were made with just sticking a Neumann U67, a tube mic condenser right in front of an amp and getting the sound that way. And I always enjoy doing that. I don't do it as much as I'd like to. Again, if I only had a few mics in the studio, I'd probably experiment with them even more. But somehow having a ton of mics, can cause us to just sort of go with the quickest and easiest solution for something.
Right.
But it's fun to explore all the different sounds. And one of my favorite guitar miking tips, which maybe I've said it too many times now, but Jamie Tate shared it on the podcast where he said he gets down in front of the amp. And this, of course, is as an engineer where somebody's bringing in a different guitar all the time. But he just unplugged the guitar so that you just hear the hiss of the amp coming out of the speaker. And then he just move his ear around in front of it until he decided he liked the tone of the hiss right in that spot. And then you kind of like put your hand up. Maybe you can, if you're close enough, you can kind of rest your hand on the grill and stick your thumb in your ear. And then you can back away and, not move your thumb. And then you can just put the mic exactly in that spot. And it does a remarkably good job of giving you a great starting tone for an amp miking.
Wow. From the hiss.
Just from the hiss. Yeah. Like you can tell what the tone of the speaker is,
Right. And you're not making yourself go deaf.
Right. Yeah. You can go deaf pretty easily doing this stuff.
Right. Yeah. It seems like the closer you are to the speaker, the more low end you get. Is that right? With the mic?
Yeah. So microphones have what's called proximity effect, which is a buildup of low frequencies when you get close to it. But recently we were talking about that and somebody pointed out that the lows from a guitar amp sometimes also don't develop until a little ways out from the amp.
Oh.
So having the mic out in front of it could give you more low end. It just kind of depends. I think that's why it's like, put the science hat on, enjoy it, take the science hat off, use your ears, and, have fun making records.
Right. Yeah. Definitely using your ears. Yeah. I try to get the guitar sounding like it does in the room most of the time, unless there's something weird I want to do with it in the mix that just works. There's one song on Room for Wrong where I found this weird like Pro Tools delay effect, like a built-in delay that had a strange side effect of a phase effect. And that's the one where I use my wife's guitar, the overdriven guitar, the Rocket Harmony. And I used this Pro Tools delay that had this weird phase, and the combination of that and the guitar. So I added it in the mix after the recording of the guitar.
Yeah.
And it just got this cool glassy sound that just really worked for the song.
Yeah. There's so much cool stuff you can do with this, the simplest, stock plugins that come with Pro Tools. Just the delay plugin alone, you can create phasing, flanging, delays. You can take a mono guitar, make it sound stereo. You can create chorusing. A lot of cool stuff you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. A friend of mine thought Pro Tools makes things sound antiseptic but I don't know. I mean,
well, I think what it doesn't do is I think what happens is when we record on analog and through analog consoles is we didn't know that we were adding certain things to the sound, a little bit of distortion, harmonics, things like that. And Pro Tools digitally doesn't add those unless you intentionally add them. So sometimes you have to work a little harder for it. But then, then there's also something to be said for this, the directness of an analog sound versus digital.
Yeah.
But that's less of a distinguisher, I think, than we recognize.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think the first thing you said, like the overdrive coming through the old preamps and the old boards, that's why a lot of soul records sound the way they do, or blues. The voice is really overdriven, and they might not have done it on purpose. It might have just been all they had.
Yeah.
But it sounds great. And I think, I'm careful about, like, especially with Fake Mirror, I think I was maybe overly careful about adding a little bit of crunch to the recording, and so it didn't sound antiseptic and clean. And I would overdrive things a bit. I have a weird Fender reverb tank that I would actually send instruments out into.
Nice.
And then back. Yeah. And then back. Like I did that to a lot of the keyboards to kind of dirty them up and make things blend. But you can overdo that stuff too. Like,
you can. And you don't, one of the challenges is when you're going through and treating the tracks one at a time, you don't always know how it's going to add up until you've done it to all of them. And then you're like, oh, they all have too much of this thing now. So then you might have to back up or something.
Right. And then it's too late. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, man, there's so much fun stuff to talk to you about. I mean, we never even talked about the time that you and I both got kicked off of Martha's Vineyard after a summer of squatting in a witch cabin.
I know. I was wondering if that was going to come up, man, in a cabin that supposedly James Taylor spent time in. Do you remember that weird?
Oh, I forgot that detail.
There was a weird rumor about that. And that was a crazy summer, fun summer. And we hung out with some odd characters on that island. Strange. Oh, here's a strange thing that my wife got me for my birthday this record. It's by this label, Captured Tracks, and they reissue stuff and sometimes find stuff that never got released. And it's all it's a compilation of bands from the 80s, like jangle bands that were kind of influenced by early REM and early New Zealand stuff. And I don't know if you remember, there was a guy we were hanging out on the island. There were the two brothers. I don't know if you remember this.
I totally do. I can't believe you're going to tell this story. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, the older brother was in this band called Salem 66, earlier. And he'd quit that band, and he was this kind of like, I don't know if you remember, he was kind of like this kind of guy walking around with a guitar on his back, kind of looked a little like Bob Dylan.
Yeah. He was like, oh, he was great because I made friends with him, as did you, but he was slightly too cool for school. And when
a little bit.
When we were hanging around in the park, we'd go and to set some context, we brought our acoustics, But this was the first time I ever learned. I was like, ooh, I'm going to string up my acoustic guitar with electric strings. So they're all like slinky and easy on the calluses. And we just go jam with the other kids in the park.
Right.
And he was there. And I'm like, hey, man, nice to meet you. My name's Elijah. What's your name? And he's like, yeah, dude, we don't really need to know names right now. We'll figure that out after we've been hanging out for a while.
You said that. I could totally believe it, man. He was a character.
I was like, oh, okay, cool, man.
Man.
But what was so cool about it and why I wanted to bring it up was and do you remember his name?
I don't remember his name. I completely forgot it. I looked him up recently, and there was this younger brother who was a lot more approachable.
Right. Right.
And I forgot his name, but I found it out just by Googling like Salem 66. He was only in the band for a little bit. He's on a record.
Well, what I remember is this was the first time I ever met somebody who had a record out.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed. I was like, that's fucking cool.
I know. I was really impressed too. And he was like, oh, that band was stupid. Yeah. I quit that band. They were dumb. I remember he was really like disparaging of it. And one of their songs is on this record, but it's not one that he's on. He wasn't with the band at this point. But that was that was a
small world, man.
Yeah, that was a crazy summer. We were hanging out with like the Vietnam vet guy. There were some characters. There was like kind of this motley crew of just like people who were away from wherever they were supposed to be for a summer, and but
didn't have a new place to be. So we showed up on the island, and we had driven over there. Well, So we had my '69 VW Bug with a sunroof on it, and I think we even strapped the windsurfer on the roof.
I don't think we didn't have a windsurfer.
We didn't. Okay.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we took our guitars with us, and then we went over there, and the plan was we were going to rent a room in somebody's house, and then we were going to get jobs. And we rented a room, and then we realized very quickly that we couldn't quite afford the room. Or no, I think my buddy Ethan was like, "Hey, man, I know this shack in the woods that a witch lived in, and you guys can go live there. Nobody's going to know, Right. And so we went and tried to get our deposit back from the first place. And we were like, and she was like, I'm not giving you your deposit back. You guys just, you put a deposit on a rental and then tried to cancel. And we were like, but we can't eat. We need food.
Yeah. And you know what? She actually was wrong. We got out of the lease within the amount of time that we were allowed to on the contract, but she wouldn't. She was so pissed that this had happened a few times. She was like, I don't care. I'm not giving you your money back. I remember because we were going to go to court. We like went to the courthouse.
Oh,
we're
I forgot.
Yeah, and they told us like, oh, your court case won't be for like weeks or months, and so we just kept hounding her, and she finally
we went to her where she worked.
Finally
at the
gave
bank.
in.
Yes. We went to the bank where she worked. But this is the best part of all, rock stars. Yeah. It was $200.
Yeah, that's right. I remember I was trying to. You remember how much it was? I was like, it was just a few hundred, right? But we were left. We were counting on getting that money back, and we basically had no money. So it's the only time I've shoplifted to eat dinner.
Oh no!
Would you remember that? Should I be saying that?
I forgot about that. It's all right.
Oh yeah,
we were all is revealed on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't get caught because man, I mean, my parents are already pissed enough that I wasn't in Cincinnati at some respectable job that summer.
You're supposed to be in pre-med.
Yeah, exactly, man. But that was fun. I mean, it's kind of funny. I've told my wife about that story, and she's like, "Wait, you're roughing it in Martha's Vineyard? Isn't that where like the Kennedys hang out? Like you weren't roughing it." It's like, well, we kind of were actually. Yeah. We were living literally in a shack with no electricity, no plumbing. That you had to like. Remember that road you had to take to get to that shack?
Yeah.
We got lost on that road a few times.
Do you remember the job that we got, or at least? I thought we either both got it or I got it. But remember, we were young, budding architects, so of course we went to go try and get a job on a construction site.
I actually messed that job up for both of us. I don't know if you remember.
I don't think so, man.
I did.
They looked at me and they were just like, "Okay, take that pallet of roofing shingles and take them up the ladder to the roof." And I was like, I couldn't even lift one of them. And then I was like, how do you get up the ladder? And he's like, throw it on your shoulder and go,
Yeah.
And I was like,
oh, totally.
I was done for after that.
Me too. It was a total like, are you a hard ass test? And we both had to do it. And I thought I kind of failed it for both of us, but I'm glad to know we both failed. And yeah.
No, I was a professional blackballer. I was blackballed from the fraternity, blackballed from a construction group. And then all I wanted to do is like, dude, let's just go play guitar in the park with all those other kids.
Yeah, which we did. Oh man, that was like I mean, we had to do something like that. It was kind of, I was itching for something like that. I mean, you were definitely the instigator. You were kind of like fearless that way. Like I would have never thought of that, but like, yeah, why not? And we didn't last. We got kicked out of the cabin. And by then I think I was frustrated enough to be like, yeah, I'm heading back to my parents with my tail between my legs. But we
went on to good summers. We did other things.
Yeah.
It was all
good.
Totally. It's all good. Totally. But I remember I went and I got another job opportunity at the movie theater, and because I knew how to be a projectionist, so I was going to go start there. And I don't remember what the other job offer was, but we went back to our cabin, and we were actually kind of like, I think there was a little bit of hope on the horizon, and so we were sort of celebrating over canned beans and some beer.
Right. I'd gotten a job
smoking a joint with it. Remember, there was another guy that I knew from high school who set up a tent.
David Koojman.
Wow.
Is that his name?
I think it might be. Yeah.
I don't know why I remember what that guy's name. That guy was cool. I really liked him.
Yeah, he was a cool cat, and he was just living in a tent next to us. But then what happened was there was an abandoned. I mean, not abandoned. It was just a vacant summer home that was like through the woods. And we're thinking like, hey, nobody's here. We're just, and we walk over and the doors open and we look in, and then there's a phone and we pick it up and we're like,
my God.
This is back when the fact there was a dial tone was like, wow, that's quite a big win. So then I think we called home.
Yes.
And later that's what bit us in the ass in the end was like one long distance phone call that was traceable.
Yeah. It was so stupid. It was like, what am I? Yeah, of course it's traceable. Yeah, the guy called. I was back in Cincinnati, and my mom. I remember this distinctly. I just got out of the shower, and she's like, "Some man just called from Martha's Vineyard saying you used his phone without his approval, without him even being there." And I was like, "Oh Jesus!" I just called the guy. I called the guy and said, whatever it is, I'll pay it. Sorry." You
were like, "Mom, I'm sorry. It was Elijah's fault. He was a bad influence. He was really a bad influence for me."
We
Mom.
really were. It was kind of. We were pretty vagrant. I don't know what the adjective version of vagrant is. We were
vagrant. It means
vagrant.
that we had ripped holes in the knees of our jeans. That's what
exactly, man.
In the 1980s.
In the
Good
80s,
for band photos. Right. well, let me see if there's anything critical I forgot to.
Sure.
Yeah, I do have one more creative question because I think this one's important for you before we close out here. And then who knows, maybe we'll have to have you back. Rockstars, let us know if you need to hear more stories from the from the
vault.
The vault from Lij's backstory here.
Yeah.
But as a writer, one of the things that always struck me about you is, you had these bold guitar parts, which I loved, and, steady hand on the drums. So your songs always just had like a, just great for writing rock songs. And you were never afraid to sing like up in the upper register with your voice. And your lyrics were always like both cool, super cool, and a total mystery to me at the same time. Which is probably true of most lyrics for me because I'm slow that way. But for example, one of the lyrics in your songs that I just thought was so brilliant was the Ponderosa song, where you're like, the chorus was, my friends work for Ponderosa. And it's like these big anthemic tracks. So
you remember that song? Wow.
I totally do. Yeah, it was great, man. But just say something about like your process for arriving at lyrics to a song, because that can be a real conundrum for us, and it's hard. It might be easier rather than hard, but we make it hard on ourselves sometimes, and we can be very self-critical in the lyrical process. Right. How do you go about things? Do you have a routine? Do you have a notebook? Does it start out with lyrics first? Does it start out with music first? Any of those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the past it was music first, and the lyrics. I kind of do what some folks do, which is just sing the first thing that comes to mind, or just have a placeholder lyrics, or just gibberish for a while,
Yeah.
while you're developing the song and figuring out, is this a song that is worth sticking with? And then once I do know, then I would start just, it's kind of like you just throw stuff in the air and just see what comes out. Sometimes I just like drink a little bit and listen to like some old records, and hey, what's coming to mind? Like, is there a phrase that one person, I can sometimes, like, just one phrase from a song, like that's in one verse. I'm like, hey, maybe I can do something with that. And like, imagery is kind of important for me. So like, I'll come up with stuff that's maybe a scene, like setting a scene. And sometimes it's just abstract images that then become a story as I start working on it.
You and David Lynch, man.
Yeah. Sometimes the lyrics, like more recently, I'm coming up with actual concept before the lyrics. Like there's one song on on Fake Mirror that I mentioned earlier called Mrs. Jensen. And like, there was this weird thing where my wife, her parents' home is this 1970s home in the suburbs of San Diego. And we go there and we'd be like, oh my God, look at this like cool 70s stuff that they still have, like this wallpaper and these like, like globe lights. And her parents would kind of like replace things one by one, like, oh, we got to upgrade the house. And we're like, no, don't do that. It's so great the way it is. And so that was like, oh, maybe I can make a song out of that concept, like some girl who grew up in this house and her parents are trying to upgrade it. It's just like something like that. It doesn't have to be about like anything heavy, like that's enough and funny enough for me. Like, it's not, they kind of vary as far as how serious they are. But more recently I've been coming up with like concepts first maybe, and then trying to make the lyrics fit them. But I find that can be hard because some like lyrics, like some of them are just, they have to not be awkward sounding coming out of my mouth.
Right.
That's a challenge.
It's tough if you make things too heavy. If you put too much pressure on yourself to do something important, you're fucked, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll have some, exactly. So I'll have like a concept, but then I'll just have some lines that might not even fit in with the concept because it's like, those lines just sound better. And
nice.
Exactly. It's kind of the sound of it. Like I think Keith Richards called it, like in his book, vowel movement. It's like vowel movement is very important for songs. So that's really that's kind of, the lyrics take a while and I'll edit them. I'll still have a couple lines I don't like and maybe replace them like 9 months later sometimes.
Wow. So, do you feel like you can hold the lyrics in your head and on a notepad as a whole, or do you feel like you have to record it and hear it back and then just go in and replace recorded lines to really understand it?
Yeah, I have to write them down. My memory's just not good enough to like remember lyrics at all. Even song ideas, I record them on a mini player. So the lyrics and usually they're not finalized till we've played it live, actually, maybe a couple times. So I have some lyrics that got changed after the recording even.
Yeah. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin. for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. So, do you remember our classes with Leslie Lasky in architecture school?
Yeah.
He was the resident super famous architect who was also
he'd been at the Bauhaus. He'd been at the Bauhaus in Germany, the Bauhaus school.
Forgotten that. And he was also like kind of within the school. He was also a little bit notorious for being a total hard ass on the students.
Oh yeah.
You know? Oh
yeah.
But actually, you know what? I'm misremembering my classes a little bit, but he was great. And what I'm remembering is our introduction to painting class. And this lesson for me has stuck with me to today. And it applies to making music and doing everything creatively. Is we were supposed to do a still life. And so the first thing we had to do was sketch the still life and then start painting in the elements, painting it in and painting it with color. So first it's a pencil outline, like, okay, here's the frame of everything. Now paint in and finish this thing out. And I showed up, for the first day of showing off our paintings, and we had all sketched our things, but then we came in for our paintings, and here I had like this one little teeny corner that I was trying to like totally finish, and one of the other guys came in and he had painted the whole painting, but it was just kind of roughed in, and
right.
The lesson from the teacher was pointing, like talking about how I was literally painting myself into a corner in this idea. It was
right.
Like I was trying to make something perfect and finished before I moved on to the next bit. And then the next bit isn't going to work with that anyway, because you can't do it like that, whereas this other guy said, all right, I'm going to put in my general colors and then we'll work in the details on this whole painting as a whole. And thinking about lyrics, thinking about writing songs, thinking about doing all of that, it's that reminder that we need to leave that element of flexibility for ourselves in the process so that we can, cross the finish line at the very end, not at the very beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's important. I think that's kind of similar to what I was saying earlier, like where don't be afraid to like tear the thing apart and kind of rearrange it. And yeah, don't perfect. You got to get the structure of the thing down first before you start thinking that like, what's the perfect guitar line for this part, before you move on to other parts. Like that's kind of, you add those embellishments later after the whole song is kind of shaped, Yeah. It's like the skeleton first and then all the other stuff gets added on. Is how I think it's, a good way to do it.
You feel like that's similar to what you do in design and architecture? And didn't you work for a lighting company for a while too, or something like that, designing lighting?
Yeah. I didn't design. I was, oh man, you're reminding me of some
we didn't even tell the story about me coming back from Hong Kong and how I think that was the last time I saw you, maybe was like, no, it must have been after that. I saw you in St. Louis, but I stayed with you for a week or, hung out with you for a week in San Francisco coming back from Hong Kong. But
oh, okay. When was that? Like
that was 91.
Okay. So that's before I moved back to St. Louis. Yeah. I assembled some lights in St. Louis. I just had like industrial job, but maybe did I design any light fixtures? I mean, I probably was just, I've placed lighting in some of my floor plans. But yeah, no, definitely that's how, with the homes and stuff, you've got to do it bit by bit. I mean, I like with the clients, clients really enjoy like doing kitchen layouts and bathroom layouts and perfecting all that. And like, because I do mostly residential work, additions or remodels, and I have to sometimes like kind of put like get them to realize that stuff needs to happen later. We have to even see if what you're proposing, do you have the budget for like this edition? Can can we even do this by code?
Yeah.
Like you got to get the skeleton of this thing figured out first.
And where's the studio? Where's the home studio going to go?
Yeah, exactly. And how do you get the best acoustics and not drive your neighbors crazy? But yeah, I mean, you have to, things have an order, and to be efficient, it's good to do them, most of the time in the kind of order that makes most sense, so you don't waste a lot of time.
Yeah. Have you had the chance to do anybody's home who wanted to have a home studio in there as well, or like was a musician?
There was one. Yeah, at the last, I worked for an architect, a residential architect, for a long time, and we did have one. Actually, one of the Pritzker, one of the people from the Pritzker family, they had a house where they were really concerned about. They wanted to do like a home theater.
Yeah.
And so they were really concerned about.
Who doesn't, man? Who doesn't?
Yeah. They really wanted acoustics. Like acoustics were so important. And maybe you know this, like they wanted windows in the home theater room, but the way that you get acoustic windows is double glaze, maybe more glaze, but if double glaze and you have the thickness of the glass be dissimilar.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't convey. Have you heard of that?
Oh,
it
yeah,
doesn't convey
totally.
the sound. Yeah, it doesn't convey the sound through there. So yeah, we've had like that client, and we were doing all sorts of acoustic tape and isolating like surfaces from other surfaces so that sound would not get transferred, throughout the structure. And then we did have one client who was looking into opening a studio, like a practice studio, and then that job fell through. But they did contact us, and Glenn, my employer, was like, "Oh, Joe, this is something you could probably work on," because I've done that with like trying to figure out how to. I practice, and I've practiced and recorded in homes now, 3 homes in a row, and I've had to do sound isolation, in these rooms and cover up windows. Like, how do you cover up a window so that you're not keeping your neighbor up and all that kind of stuff? So yeah, so I've done some of that stuff on my own. I have these windows here that we had to block because right when I moved into this house, somebody called the cops while we were practicing, and I had to deal with that.
It's like straight back to Martha's Vineyard, dude.
I know, exactly, completely.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, dude, let me see here. Let me. Is there anything that you didn't get a chance to talk about that you absolutely want to, or shall I take us straight to our closing question?
The only thing I'll say, maybe I'll tell the story about how I first started multitracking.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's kind of a weird thing. It was like 5th grade or so that I had, those old, those like Panasonic tape recorders from the 70s. I don't know if you remember those things.
Yeah.
Like
where you got to it lays on its back.
It lays on its back. It's got the pull-out handle at the front end, and So I had, like, my dad was he had a lot of gear like that, I think, from being a psychiatrist, and I had a couple of those, and I would borrow his stuff, and I just thought, and I had a drum set already, and I was starting to play like guitar, like on a toy guitar, and I thought, man, you know what? I can record the drums, play the drums. Like, basically this tape recorder had a built-in condenser mic. So I used it to record the drums, play that tape with one of the players out live in the room, play guitar, next to it, myself singing, and record with the second one, right?
Wow.
So it's like open air multi-track recording. And so that's how I started.
Take that, Dave Gendelman. Yeah. Joe was doing it long before you, man.
Yeah. So yeah, I was always thinking of multi-tracking. Like, it just kind of, I don't know. That was always kind of there to, like, as something to pursue,
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, we had the Panasonic cassette recorder. And then when I was a kid, I remember my brother and my cousin and I, as the family's driving the orange pickup truck with the cab top. We're bouncing around. We're going cross country, no seatbelts, bouncing around in the back on the highway in a, just with a mattress thrown back there, not thinking anything of it. And so we're taking the cassette recorder and trying to write songs and sing them on that thing. And of course, every song was something about like, waiting for you on track 9 or something like that. I don't know where the hell we got it, but I'm sure the word boulevard was in there somewhere too, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Overpass, boulevard.
Yeah. But it all begins early.
Oh yeah.
And here we are. We refuse to give it up.
Hell yeah.
That's right.
Chasing the dream.
Well, Joe, thanks for hanging out with us on the show, man. Here is the last question that I like to ask all my guests.
Yes,
this
sir.
is we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back and find young Joe. I don't know where you are. Maybe it's, recording on the Panasonic. You want to go back and you find yourself and you say, look, Joe, look, young Joe, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself? Probably is like, dude, stick with the architecture. Stick with the architecture.
Yeah, with me, I think it's hard to pick one, but one that does come to mind is like I should have gotten a job early and bought some gear, like bought some real gear, like early on. Before I had my tape deck, I was kind of struggling on like,
right. You couldn't afford something new. So you stuck with the not great sounding stuff for too long.
Right. And I just kind of do that in general. Like I'll stick with something that works and not want to take the time to learn something new. And I think this isn't a very exciting or sexy lesson, but that's kind of more of a practical one. It's kind of,
but I think we can relate to it.
Yeah. Like not being afraid. Like, I was like mixing down on the GarageBand, like mixing down from the 8-track to GarageBand, and like for the second album for a couple songs, and my wife was like, Jesus, don't use GarageBand, use Pro Tools. And I was thinking like, I don't want to have to learn a new thing, but like I did it, and it's like, thank God I did, she kind of like made me do it, and like, thank God. It's like, yeah. So stuff like that.
Amy rocks.
And maybe that's, yeah, exactly. Maybe that's not a problem for a lot of people, I think. A lot of people like want to get new stuff.
But we've got a lot of,
stuff.
A lot of the rock stars, a lot of our audience are people like us, there are many of us that started out interested in music and recording, did the band thing, kind of went and did maybe another job or career, trying to keep that going and circle back. And there are a lot of people who have a story of like, okay, I'm fine. I'm trying to, embrace and accept that the new way of recording is with the computer and everything. And oh my God, how does this thing work? So the fear of that stuff is palpable for sure,
Yeah, definitely. It's a big switch, especially over to computer too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
dude, go ahead. Go finish your thought.
I was going to say, that lesson. And then maybe just the other lesson, which is like to, I guess what I was saying earlier, like not be afraid to just like be willing to like approach the song from a different angle, totally different angle. Like at some point, if it's not working, like you can just maybe just the best part of the song and make a new song around that and dump the rest,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Editing is, I think, important. I think.
Yeah. Well, it's easier to edit too in the digital world for sure.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes the editing that's really helpful is just sitting down with the guitar and just, write out the song arrangement and edit that way mentally and begin again.
Right. That's that's more what I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
Dude, it was a blast hanging out with you, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, this was
great
fun.
to see you again. How long has it been since we actually had a conversation?
I think since '94 or something like that. Because I left St. Louis around then, and we were kind of crossing paths around that time, like through Chris and Enormous Richard and the band, and then
man, what kind of friend am I?
I moved out here and I kind of disappeared for a while from like a lot of people. Like St. Louis, I didn't go back there much. I went back once, I think, twice. So I've been pretty bad about it.
That's all right, man. Here we are.
It's been a while.
It's never too late, rock stars.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Yeah, dude. Great hanging out with you, man. let the rock stars know where they can go check out all your work. Now, of course, we're going to include tons of links in the show notes, but is there anywhere you want them to go hear your latest record? If they just, maybe they're coming out there and they're ready to double team up, double book a gig or something like that. How should the rock stars find you online?
Yeah, I guess Bandcamp's probably the best way, like the Aerosols on Bandcamp. And there's another band called Just Aerosols, which was a hardcore band, which is definitely not us, who aren't current anymore. But yeah, probably there. We've got a couple records there. We have like a Facebook page. We don't have like a standalone website, but it's SoundCloud. We do have stuff up there. We have some live stuff and some demos that are nowhere else. So that's a kind of a good spot. And yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then Rockstars, reminder, that's spelled Aerosols.
Exactly.
Aerosols. Well, Joe,
right. Yeah.
You rock, dude.
Thanks.
I'm actually trying to remember any like sayings we had from way back then, but I can't quite remember what they were. I'm sure we did.
Yeah, I don't think we made any up at that point. I think, maybe we did. I'm just not remembering.
We didn't have our own language?
Yeah. Maybe in Martha's Vineyard, if we'd stayed there longer in the shack, we would have. But yeah.
Great. All right, dude. Well, Rockstars, thanks so much for listening. This was an epic episode. We're going like full Joe Rogan now with like 3-hour interviews. So
oh my God, yeah,
amazing. Joe, I look forward to seeing you around, dude. And
yeah, sure.
You got to come to Nashville and let's make a record at the Toy Box sometime.
All right.
Open invitation.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll be in touch. Let me know when this goes up.
I will indeed, dude. Great to see you. And thanks for listening, Rockstars. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. API, OWC, Spectra 1964, Samply, Atom Audio, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription for access to many plugins. At samply.app, sign up for a free account with unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade to a pro account. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. You will find links to all these awesome sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.